How did your life turn out after you bought a one-way ticket and started everything from scratch? I did this when I was 16. I took one backpack worth of clothes, said goodbye to my family, and flew off to the other side of Australia. Just before I left, I found a place to stay via Gumtree, which was a similar website to Craigslist. Being young and naive, I didn't realize the full extent of what I was doing, and soon realized that without a job, I just couldn't afford my rent. I ended up in the hospital, then in youth shelters for a few months, and at one stage during that I had to stay on the streets for about 2 weeks. So that was fun. Long story short though, this was over 10 years ago, and now I live in a different state altogether and work in the financial industry, doing quite well for myself. I have no regrets. I met some amazing people and had some crazy journeys. From rural Mississippi to Southern California. I was bartending and I saved up a couple of $1,000, which I used to prepay for 2 months in a hotel. I packed what I could into my car, including my dog, and drove here. I kinda had the attitude that I would even work at McDonald's if I had to, but I found a decent job after about a month and a half and things worked out. Best decision I ever made. I've done something similar several times. When I was young, I used to work 2 full-time jobs at a time, save up as much money as I could in a couple of years, and then quit my jobs, sell everything that didn't fit on my bicycle, buy a one-way ticket somewhere else, and then see how far I could get on the money that I had. I did that 3 times in all, but I'd come home in between to make money. I could get roughly 1-to-1 time exchange and travel for just as long as I worked. I highly recommend it, but it is a game for the young. For trip 1, I started in London, Western Europe, Eastern Europe before the wall fell, and the Middle East. Trip 2 started in Amsterdam, Western Europe, North Africa, across the Sahara, West Africa, Central and East Africa. Trip 3 started in Athens, the Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, 6 years of peddling altogether. My ex-wife ended our marriage totally out of the blue. I was devastated. I bought a one-way plane ticket to the other side of the world with £1,000 sterling in my back pocket. No job, nowhere to live. That was around 4 years ago. I now have a great job, a gorgeous girlfriend, and a house overlooking the beach. Thanks, ex-wife. I had a one-way gas pedal. I sold all of my stuff, got in my little Civic and drove across Canada to Vancouver sight unseen. Been here for 15 years now, new friends, married, kid, own a business, everything's good. Now we're thinking of doing the same thing as a family, packing up and moving overseas to where our ancestors came from. Why not? Life's too short to stay in one place forever. The narrator was thinking that he'd never be brave enough, but then now that you mention it, I did a softer version of this 9 years ago, and I'm now a business owner in the country I live in now, so yeah, sometimes your little crazy trip sneaks up on you and turns into your new life. At the age of 27, I sold everything in my house, moved from the southeast corner of the country to the Pacific Northwest. It was a wild drive, and it's been wild times since then. I've gone on to accomplish the greatest things I've ever done in my life so far. There have been dark, lonely times, but also the best times I've had in my life so far. Seattle is great. Leaving it all behind isn't for everyone. It takes a strong person. You will feel alone, you will doubt your decision, but if it's something you've always wanted to do, you'll be grateful in the end and you'll become a better version of yourself. If you truly want something out of your life, go get it. Period. Let nothing stop you. That deathbed is coming for you, same as it is for everyone else. Are you okay with spending your time where you are for the rest of your life? Or would you look back with regret? We get so caught up in life that we forget that we only have this one chance to do what we love. Don't be curious forever. Go out. Go after what you want. The price was steep, but I paid it gladly. It was an investment in myself. In the end, the decision must be based on the real question you must ask yourself. Who do you want to be? Not what do you want to be? Do you want to be the person who left or the person who stayed? I'm in my early 20s and just ended a long-term unhealthy relationship and moved across the country to California to completely start over. I saved up a few months' expenses back home and found a place on Craigslist to move into before I flew in. It took me about a month to find a seasonal job, and luckily as that job ended, I got hired on to a nice food chain. I've been here in Stockton for 7 months and I currently live paycheck to paycheck. I don't own a vehicle, so I bike everywhere, but I feel so free and in control of my life now. I don't ever regret coming to California, even though I live in one of the worst possible cities to have hope in. These other stories make me feel like a silly, complacent fool. I want an adventure. No, I'm a Baggins from Bag End. The best thing I have ever done was move to the other side of the planet. I would rather be a waitress in Germany than a professional anything in Australia. The lifestyle, people, location, smell, food, transport, socks, toothpicks, luggage, beer, watches, supermarkets, ice cream, makeup, speakers, printers, housing, wine, cleaning products, and dogs, they suit me better than the comfort and safety of Australia. I love everything about Germany, and I will do anything to never leave. I don't regret it. Not even once. I'm originally from Maryland. I've had a few IT-related jobs, but got into bartending. I worked in bars for 8 years, dead-end jobs, all of them. I lived the bar lifestyle. Good money, but then I went nowhere. A buddy I went to school with hooked me up with a job in San Francisco working at a game studio. I packed a bag, grabbed $2,000, one-way ticket, and moved. Worked at that studio for a year, got another job, then another, then another. Busted my butt for 4 years now, but I have a well-paying job at a great company with plenty of new friends and a career. I don't even have the urge to visit Maryland. I convinced my boyfriend that we should quit our jobs and move into a custom camper on the back of a truck. We've got a couple of duffel bags of clothes, our dog, a couple of milk crates of books, and a lot of cooking equipment. Now we travel around making pies for people and giving them away for free. We don't anticipate being nomadic forever. In fact, we'd like to go back to Michigan when our pie tour is over and open a donation-based cafe. But we're both loving the tiny nomadic life right now. 3 years ago, I left a good-paying job, my incredibly loving friends, my parents, and a lifestyle that left me wanting for little to finish my education. I had, at the time, been paying $1,000 a month in tuition and was close to graduating, but knew that I needed to have a different degree and continue on to grad school. I was accepted to a school that was $45,000 a year, so I looked elsewhere and found a place with a great reputation and about a third of the cost. Everything fell apart for me within a month of my move. I spent all of my savings to start this new life. Since then, I've been struggling so hard just to make ends meet that I haven't been able to save up enough to move back home. Each semester I stay here, I get further and further off track. Instead of working towards my goals of graduation and grad school acceptance, I'm having to spend each day simply getting through it. Just when I think I'm finally back on track, something else happens and I'm back to square one. I went from $55,000 a year to minimum wage part-time. I went from a 1,500 square foot condo with an in-unit high-efficiency washer and dryer, walking distance from rapid transit, to having to share with a stranger because one-bedroom apartments are too expensive for me and begging for rides to the laundrette. I've taken classes one by one while 2 full classes of graduates have gone on without me. If I could do it all over, I would have never come here. I would have found some way to make it work back home. I would have gone to a lesser school, or lived in a bad neighborhood, or, I don't know, I just would never have come here. The worst part is how isolated I am. I don't have any family remotely nearby. All the friends I made graduated and moved away. Then the friends I made after that have graduated and are packing up, as I type to move away. Nobody comes to visit me and I don't have the means to visit them. Even if I had the money to rent a car, my work schedule just didn't allow it. The only days I had off were the days when I was in class for 6 hours. I regret absolutely everything about this. I made a decision knowing that I had the drive and ability to reach my goals, but I forgot that some things depend on the actions of others. I was waiting for one of these. I figured that not all of these stories could statistically be winners. I'm sorry that things just didn't work out for you with that trip. I did do a quick check of your profile and it seems like at least you've moved on to pastures new, and I hope things are better now. I'd finished college, I had no direction with my life, so I moved to Honduras and worked at an orphanage for a year. It was great. I ended up coming back to the States afterwards, went to law school, graduated, passed the bar and got a job, and I'm now getting the itch to go and try something intense and new once more. Any suggestions? I ran out of money and had to come home and get a job. I regret that bit of it. I got a traveling IT job that had me going to different towns every day. I was on the road for 6 months and lived out of my tent the whole time, utilizing dry cleaners to maintain that professional image. I was grossing like $1,600 a week and I had every Friday and Sunday off. I've never been happier. Eventually I upped it to a Cadillac of pop-up campers and that's why I'm a pop-up king. I met a girl on America Online. It was in 1994. I was in Kansas, she was in Colorado. I traveled out there to make sure she wasn't a guy, and she wasn't. I went back to Kansas. A couple of months later I bought a plane ticket to Denver and sent for my stuff. We've been married for over 17 years. We both graduated from college and I got a law degree. None of it would have happened if I hadn't taken the risk. It's really weird because I've never had a want to do this before, but lately I've been having a very real urge to drop everything and drive to the Pacific Northwest with my car and a few prized possessions. I don't have a lot saved, but probably enough to do it and afford myself a couple of months to get on my feet in a new location. I'm fortunate to know so many great people here where I am, but I just can't shake this urge. Best decision ever. Had a baby, came to Colorado for a wedding, and loved it so much a week later we left our baby here with her grandma while we went home to upstate New York. Packed as much stuff as we could in our 97 Buick, and after a 4-day trip of chaotic mishaps we finally made it to our new home. I enrolled in a massage school and I couldn't be happier. Plus, Mary J was legalized that same month. Winning. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I didn't regret my move at all. When I was flushed from basic at 18 due to severe arthritis in my elbows, I was a weightlifter in high school and that came back to bite me in the butt, I was stuck without anywhere to go. My grandma had just moved to France, there was no family to speak of that were alive or cared enough to offer me a couch, so I sold all the valuables I still had and bought a Greyhound ticket to Portland, Oregon. That was 3 years ago this past April. Since then, I've traveled all over the West Coast, learned how to skateboard, saw a driftwood tree as wide as a house is tall, met probably hundreds of homeless kids, and traveled anywhere I wanted, anytime I wanted. I've been to almost every state, minus the far northern ones, as I'm from the Keys in Florida, and crap from Ohio North is too cold for me. I know, I'm a wimp. I've traveled Route 66, seen Yellowstone, Mount Rushmore, the Grand Canyon, the museums and memorials in Washington, D.C., along with the oddities like the largest frying pan and yarn ball and all that jazz. Then I met some people from a group called a Rainbow Family, whom to this day I keep in contact with, and thanks to that group, my life changed for the better. I was stuck in Vegas. Horrible, I know. And lo and behold, I met a bunch of dudes headed to Northeast Tennessee for the national gathering, and there I met my fiancé, whom I'm proud to say I just had a baby girl with. We both have great jobs, have our adorable daughter, and it's thanks to just buying a ticket and getting out of my comfort zone. To this day, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made. In short, basically, it was the best thing I've done. Met my fiancé while traveling, along with hundreds of awesome people, and saw things that I never thought I'd see. You should do it, bro. So long as you're smart about it, you won't regret it. In 2003, my wife and I decided we couldn't bear living in the US any longer. We sold everything we had except our house, a couple of suitcases of clothes, and a small laptop. We bought plane tickets, round trips were oddly less expensive than one way, to Spain, and then promptly threw the return tickets away. We've never regretted that decision, and the chances of us ever returning, other than to visit the family members, are virtually zero. We currently have our own translation company, and even in this economic crisis, we're able to live happily and comfortably. We love this life, our family, our jobs and prospects. We just hope that Spain and the rest of the struggling economies can find a way out of this horrendous economic mess. Written in 2013. I had that opportunity a number of times. I didn't take any of my chances, and I'm stuck here in this hellhole without that woman's unconditional love, support, or friendship. I say in the strongest possible terms, should that opportunity present itself to anyone else, do it. Even if it doesn't work out, the story alone will get you drinks or food. I regret coming back. I did too, until I realized that coming back doesn't mean you have to stay. It is true. Some people just have that wanderlust and thrive more out on the road than others, although that's less about buying a one-way ticket, I suppose. Still, if you've got that urge or you miss the feeling and have no family relying on you, maybe you can get out there again. It's not for everyone, the narrator included, but some of you crazy people seem to draw life and energy from it. Late last winter, just past the brink of 30, I'd had enough of my life. I ended an almost 5-year relationship in the fall and opened a small store, which was failing after my business partner pretty much bailed on me after his own relationship ended around the same time. New York City, my ancestral homeland, had felt like a prison as soon as I'd ended up back in it 7 years prior. I'd been dying to leave, but love and commitments had nailed me down. After finally having a talk with my business partner and him agreeing to close the store, I cried my eyes out in the back of the shop. When I could breathe again, I went to visit my best friend at her bar, where another friend of ours happened to be freshly returned from a long vacation. "You should go there," he insisted. I think it'll embrace you." He waxed rhapsodic and showed me a few photos of a place I'd never considered. Okay, I'll go. Worst case scenario, I hate it and I just pack up and go somewhere else. I'd sat still for quite long enough. 6 weeks later, I'd sold almost everything I owned, the most painful part being my books and comics. I packed whatever was left into a couple of duffel bags, had a pretty fantastic roller coaster of a going-away party, got on a bus and began a meandering road trip adventure from friend's couch to friend's couch, having an amazing time catching up with people I hadn't seen for years. And then it was 2 weeks later, 6 a.m., and I was stepping off that last bus into the still dark morning. The air hit me, thick and warm and damp and sweet. The night-blooming jasmine swept along in the faint breeze of the river, and I was home. New Orleans was the home I didn't know I was missing. I'm so in love with my life here. I'm more myself, some better, stronger, happier version of myself than I've ever been, and I'm grateful every day. I work for an artist, I make art myself, I spend time with all of these amazing friends I have, and I wander through one of the warmest, most interesting, beautiful cities I've ever known. And now I'm in a relationship unlike anything I ever thought possible. It's so fairy tale that we can't help but constantly laugh to each other about it. Regrets? Not a single damn one. At age 27, my dad had a good job, a stable relationship, born and raised in Hong Kong. Then he decided to take a vacation to Vancouver, Canada. This was back in '72, and he fell in love with the city and decided he wanted a life there. His girlfriend refused to come over, and making a life was difficult, according to him, yet he stayed. They broke up. My dad eventually tried investing in the housing market with a few friends. Lost almost all of his money, partly because Vancouver's real estate 40 years ago was nearly non-existent, and also because his friends were just blazed out of their minds half the time. He was so poor at the time and couldn't even afford a ticket back to Hong Kong. He then got extremely lucky and landed a job as a tourist guide for Chinese tourists visiting Canada, and instead of being paid, the company agrees to fly him back to Hong Kong. He worked hard for 10 to 15 years and found a wife. Does stuff with her, I pop out, and he decides he wants his family to live in Vancouver, so he comes back with us. He retires when he arrives in Vancouver in '96. I've asked him before, does he regret his decision back in '72, and he says he doesn't regret anything because in the end, everything worked out. When I was 19, I moved to Germany, all by myself. I left my parents in Brazil, haven't talked to them in a few years. In Germany, there's a test equivalent to the SATs called the AITA. You can only take it once in your life and it lasts 2 years. That's how hardcore it is. Anyway, ever since I was in the 5th grade, I wanted to take this test. I started speaking German in 3rd grade and worked my way up until I was 17, going on 18 when I started my AmITheA. It was quite tough in the beginning. I lived at home still, so my parents were still quite protective. Whenever I wanted to go out, I still depended on them, and that really irked me. I didn't have a job and couldn't get one because of the amount of schoolwork I had, so all the money came from my parents. It was really hard for me to depend so much on them because I really wanted to be independent. When I finished the AITA, I was 19. I took the first flight available to Germany, and I'll never forget that excitement I felt right when I was going to board the plane. To quote The Shawshank Redemption, it was, "The excitement only a free man can feel." I boarded the plane and felt truly amazing. I was finally going away, independent, and hoped to never have to go back to that life. Upon my arrival in Frankfurt, I instantly knew that I was in love with the country. I stayed in Frankfurt a few days and just walked around doing whatever I liked. If I wanted to, I could just stop by a store. If I wanted to, I could buy a €30 shirt. I could do whatever I pleased. I left Frankfurt, but I haven't forgotten the love I have for that city. I stayed in a small town called Haar, next to Munich. Funnily enough, the town's name means hair, and it's something that had always represented the repression I'd grown under. I'd always wanted to grow out my hair and paint it blue, so that's what I did. I started my studies in the Technical University of Munich. I wanted to become an electrical engineer. I'd always liked building things. I spent 5 years basically studying non-stop, and now I live in Hamburg. So all in all, I don't regret my decision of moving. I like being free. I like doing whatever I want. In fact, I'm so free that I wasn't even constrained by my degree when looking for a job. I'm an architect now, which doesn't really have too much in common with electrical engineering. In fact, my boss came up to me and told me he'd need help with the electrical cables we were changing in his office. He called me into it and I asked him, "Was brauchen Sie?" which basically translates to, "What do you need?" "Ich brauch Baumfidden," was his response, which means he needed tree fiddy. It was then that I realized that my boss of 6 years was a 500-foot-tall reptile from the Paleozoic era? That damn Loch Ness monster had had me again. Okay, so this is the narrator editing, several hours after recording that initial piece. I stared at the script for ages. The comment is 12 years old. I don't know if the reference is something that anyone will understand, but I'm leaving it in on the off chance that it's the funniest thing in the world for one of you out there, because I sure don't get it. After watching my thriving business with 5 employees implode in late 2008, I basically said, screw it, and joined the Navy to do something radically different with my life. Now I'm happily married to an awesome girl I would have never met otherwise. I have a new skill set. I have a job I don't like very much, but I'm out of the Navy in a few years. Thankfully, I get to keep the skill set and the wonderful wife, I hope. When I finished my time on active duty in the Army, I was 8 months pregnant. I met my daughter's father in training and spent a week with him before heading for my first duty station. In that week, I accidentally became pregnant. He convinced me to move to his hometown in Indiana so that we could try and work on things and raise our daughter. Not surprisingly, things didn't work and now I'm stuck here. He's a great dad, but here with no close family is very hard, especially since it took me years to get out and make friends of my own. So, yeah, I kind of regret it. My fiancé gave me a 2 weeks notice that I needed to pack up my crap and get ready because he was coming to get me to move me a state away. I had no money, nothing really of value to my name, and ended up shoving all of my stuff in boxes and making the fastest, most unplanned move of my life. There was no decision about it, no prior notice, just, I got us a place, get ready to go. I don't regret the decision, but it could have gone so much worse. I'd only known my fiancé for a short amount of time and had never lived away from my parents. He could have easily turned out to be some sort of serial killer and nobody would have cared, but I ended up with the best life ever. Sure, things are hard financially. I wish we'd saved up money first. I wish I could have had a hand in picking out our future little home, but I definitely don't regret the move. Not to go into too much detail, but my previous living situation was pretty horrible and he wanted to get me out of there. So he did. What's the most cruel thing you've ever done? In high school, one of my teachers had rented a pager and numbers were on a dymo strip along the side. Being high schoolers, we thought it would be funny to page it all the time with silly things like 8008135, spell it out, and 69. Finally, at the end of the week, the teacher looked at the pager and was clearly upset and said, "Man, someone keeps paging me nonsense, and my wife is pregnant and due any time, and we only got this so she could page me when she goes into labor so I can go get her." Oops, we stopped after that. That teacher played you guys. He knew you'd feel guilty and stop messing with his pager so that he could free it up to run his pimping business on the side. Most people I remember from high school would have taken this as an opportunity to page him, "Baby is coming now," or similar. This was when pagers only allowed you to enter in a phone number to display on the pager. When I was young, I had an argument with a friend, so I insulted him because his parents were dead. I went home, realized what I'd done, and cried my little eyes out. He came over as I was crying and comforted me. Still don't have words for that. You insulted him and he comforted you? That's a true friend right there. It was worth killing his parents after all. Done to myself, but my sister scratched my face and it didn't leave a mark. I really wanted to get her in trouble, so I ended up scratching myself really hard as evidence, and my mum still didn't believe me. So now I just have a little scar on my cheek from all those years ago. I got a hold of my high school nemesis email and phone number, so anytime a survey, subscription, or anything that spams you came up, I signed that B-word right up. I'm out of high school now, but I don't think I'll ever stop. Fricking hate that kid. I also used to take the pencil sharpener from where it was and use it literally inches from his face until he threw a little fit. Dude, there's a website where you can send Mormons to yours or other people's house. Of course, I would never encourage anyone to do something so cruel, but it is there. One of my friends did that to me. They showed up and I was confused for a second, then realized what must have happened and felt terrible explaining to them someone was pranking me. They laughed and said it happened all the time and they were used to it. Then they gave me a free copy of the Book of Mormon and left. Mormons are really nice people from what I've seen of them, but Jesus frick was that book weirder than the strangest sci-fi. I really don't understand how grown adults believe in that crap. I'm looking at pictures of Jesus preaching to the freaking Aztecs, and people actually believe that crap. Blows my mind. As people who listen to my videos are used to, we got a little off topic here, but my lord is it funny to know that you can send out for a Mormon prank squad in this day and age. I was in 5th grade. We were on a field trip and I wrote on a wall, "Scott's mum is a working girl." Then Scott went, "Dude, my mum is dead." Then I changed it to, "Scott's mum was a working girl." That's terrible. But it's also pretty funny, unfortunately. As a child, I remember my mother taking my sister and I through McDonald's drive-thru and ordering each of us a burger and fries. We were fairly poor back then, but Mum splurged and let us each have the treat. When we got to the window, my sister and I started whining about it not being a Happy Meal and not getting the toy. In the grand scheme of things, it's not necessarily cruel, as a child is thoughtlessly cruel to their parents all the time. But as an adult, I die on the inside when I realize how humiliated my mother must have been to not being able to afford the Happy Meals, and some nice teenager in the window gave the boxes and toys to her anyway. I apologized to her a few months ago for being such an ungrateful brat, and bless the woman, she doesn't even remember, and here I've been cringing off and on for the last 2 decades over it. I cringe when I think of all the thoughtless, ungrateful things I said or did to my parents when I was a kid. I'd like to think that neither of my folks remember any of it, or that they wouldn't have held it against me and put it down to kids being kids. I miss my mum and dad. Drove my college girlfriend to an on-campus party in her car. I had the keys. Found out at the party that she was cheating on me with a guy that was a friend at the party. Told her to get the frick out. As she walked down the street, I pounded a beer in the front yard. Realized I still had her car and dorm keys. Said, "Hey, B-word, you forgot your keys," and threw them at her. She was maybe 30 yards away under a streetlight. Keys hit her in the back of the head and she dropped like a sack. I instantly felt terrible and still do 25 years later. Her dropping like a rock under the streetlight without even making a sound is still stuck in my head. Even though she cheated, that was uncalled for. We're all good now. All is forgiven. I'm chronically ill. When I was younger, we didn't know what was wrong with me. Weekday mornings were awful because I was in an exorbitant amount of pain, and more often than not, I could not go to school. I would relay this to my mum, who would insist nothing was wrong with me and that I needed to get up and go. This was shortly after moving to the other end of the state and starting middle school, so I became extremely depressed. One day, while sobbing, I told my mum she was the reason I didn't want to live anymore. Of course, it wasn't her fault, and that's not really what I meant. I was just a kid in too much pain. Years ago, my then wife, who I was desperately in love with, cheated on me. I caught her blowing a friend of mine. We had a 7-month-old son at the time. I was devastated. For financial reasons, I couldn't leave, so we continued to live in the same house, and I was rocking the couch. 2 weeks or so later, she comes to me with a positive pregnancy test. Frick. Whose is it? No idea, still don't know almost 9 years later. I decide that maybe I can get past this. We went to marital counseling a couple of times, but after the 3rd visit, the therapist was amazing, she doesn't want to go anymore. She's secretive but insists that she wants to make it work, and like an idiot, I trust her. Few weeks later, I see some messages on her phone, and she's still talking to the crapbag friend of mine. I decide, frick this, and tell her I want a divorce. Crapbag friend also tells her to F off. Now she's devastated and realizes she's facing being a single mother of 2 at 24 years old. She panics and really starts trying to put in work to save our marriage. It's too late. I'm ice cold. Frick this B-word. I moved in with a buddy of mine and come by every day to see my son after work, but no conversation with his mother. Months go by and the little guy is born. I accept him as mine. I've got custody of both now, incredible kids, and the X figures this will get me back. I'm still filled with intense rage for what she did to me. I start talking to her more, friendly and often. She gets comfortable with me and we message each other often. She tells me she still loves me all the time. I tell her we can maybe discuss starting something again. She starts wearing her wedding ring again, telling her family and friends we're going to reconcile. Few weeks go by and this rather trashy female friend I had, friend with benefits at the time, comes over and we're going to do the nasty. I get a text from the ex saying she wants to see me and has a sitter for the kids, so I tell her to come over and leave the door open. The trashy female friend knows what's up and is totally okay with it. Ex arrives about 30 minutes later to walk in on this girl riding me on the couch. I make full eye contact and I can actually see her heart breaking into a million pieces right in my doorway. She leaves and that was that. It was freaking cruel and I regret it. Pro tip for the readers at home, being as bad or worse than someone who hurts you never makes you feel better. Told my identical twin sister that I see her as nothing more than a person who I happen to look like. She's obsessed with having a sisterly relationship with me and I can't even find myself telling her I love her. Just putting that down in this text box is weird for me. This is super interesting to me. I'm an identical twin myself, and I'll be honest, our relationship has always been rocky. We spend as long as 8 months not talking to each other over stupid crap. Luckily, now that we live almost 30 minutes away, we've never been closer. I've also noticed that with a lot of twins, their relationship is either inseparable or rocky. Why do you feel the way you do with your sis? Also an identical twin, and my brother and I used to say the most horrible, hurtful things to each other. We had a rocky relationship, me being addicted to substances and him more or less watching me die. When he started smoking green herb after my addiction wasn't controlling me, it got better. We became closer than ever, and then he up and fricking moved to China. He's literally halfway across the world right now, and we talk more than we ever have. When I was in preschool, I had to go pee and this other kid was in front of me, so I punched him in the nose. He left the bathroom with a bloody nose and I went to pee. Got back to the classroom with the teacher furious at me and I had to sit in the naughty chair for an hour. Are you the reason I was afraid of public restrooms until I was 10? Oh boy, my man here just followed the desire of everyone who's ever been stuck in the queue for the toilets at a nightclub. And instead of childish selfishness, we have childish selfishness brought on by alcohol, so I'm sure it's happened on nights out too. My grandma has been fighting cancer for 6 years. First, it started in her chest, but she had them removed. Then it spread to her bones and skull. Right now, she's living with my uncle, aunt, and their children, but none of them seem to really care about her. Now, she's always been able to do things for herself, but for the past couple of weeks it's been really hard for her. No one told us, and when we came to visit, she only weighed 88 pounds and was looking really bad. She told us no one had come into her room for a week and she'd eaten not a thing, so my mum told me that I was staying to take care of her. I absolutely didn't want to because this family is absolutely horrible to each other, and I didn't want to deal with their bratty kids or their incessant gossiping and psychotic ways. So last night I was packing my things and my grandma kept looking at me and saying, "I'm so happy you're staying," as a sort of desperate plea. I loaded my suitcase into the car and then she gave me the most defeated look I've ever seen and choked out, "But if you leave, Grandma will cry," and just started weeping. I've never seen her cry. She's such a strong woman and never once complained about the chemo, radiation, surgeries, or anything. So now I'm staying. It must suck dealing with crappy family, especially while battling a physically exhausting and excruciating disease. Be the light in each other's lives. Frick the bullcrap, that's temporary. Unfortunately, so is the time with your grandma. When you look back, you won't remember some butthole kid or the gossip-guzzling mother. You'll remember your time with your grandma and how you were there for her when her other crap bags weren't. When I was in high school, my parents were in the middle of a nasty divorce and I was stuck in the crossfire. I didn't know whose side I should have been on and was angry at both of my parents. Being a teenager going through puberty certainly didn't help either. My dad got a promotion at work and I had to move cities with him and left everything I knew behind. Friends, school, etc. This made me despise my dad even more than I already did at the time, and I would go out of my way to be a butthole to show him how much I hated living with him. One morning, as we were getting ready to leave the house, my dad went to give me a hug and I pushed right past him with my shoulder. I remember in perfect detail the look on his face of shock and confusion. Makes me sick to my stomach just thinking about it. That was the cruelest thing I've ever done. I realize now as I'm older how hurt he must have felt in that moment. He busted his butt working 80+ hours a week and made sure I had everything I ever needed and wanted nothing more than for me to be happy with him, and that's how I repaid him, by being a butthole. My dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack a few months after that when I was 16, and I never got to tell him how much I appreciated everything he did for me. Hindsight is 20/20. Sounds cliche, but really, spend time with your parents. Understand that everyone is human and makes mistakes. No one is perfect. Look for solutions to problems in your relationship, instead of pointing out what's wrong. Next time you see your dad, give him a hug. I'm sure he understood underneath the pain. I'll go and hug my dad after reading this. I met a girl in an AOL chat room. We lived in the same town and she insisted that we meet. She wouldn't show me a picture of herself, but insisted that she was hot. I was leery of meeting her, but after talking on the phone, she seemed cool, so I agreed to pick her up and we were going to go hang out. I was new to the town and I figured it couldn't hurt to at least make some new friends. Well, I pick her up and she was far from attractive. I was okay with that though because like I said, I was new and needed to make friends. A few minutes after I pick her up, she said, "Well, I have $75 and we can go to a hotel room." I was way not interested in that and said, "No, let's go to a movie." She kept insisting about getting a hotel and all the things she wanted to do to me. It was really overbearing. Eventually, I'd had enough. I pulled into a gas station and told her I was thirsty. I gave her a $10 bill and asked her if she would grab me a Sprite. She happily jumped out of the car to get it. As soon as she stepped inside, I peeled out of there and went home. Actually went and played a game of tennis, leaving her at the gas station. I want to add that we were a good 25 to 30 minutes from her house when I dropped her off. I was living in a desert climate at the time and it was a good 112 degrees out that day. Stabbed a kid in the thigh with a ballpoint pen in 7th grade math class because he told me to stop interrupting him. I stabbed someone with a pencil in high school. I don't even remember why. Neither does he actually, but we became friends and anytime we disagreed on anything, he'd go, "You stabbed me!" "Let it go, Joel. You were fine." In elementary school, there was this kid, I'll call him Bob, who I just couldn't stand. When we were in 3rd grade, things escalated and we got in a couple of fights. The first time he poked me in the eye, I don't believe he intended to though, and I had to wear an eye patch for 1 or 2 weeks. Later that year, I decided I'd had enough of him and grabbed his backpack, threw it on the ground and stomped it. Our parents got in touch and decided an apology was due, and so his mother brought him over to us. While our mothers were talking, we started playing. We probably got bored. We're best friends for almost 10 years now. When I was in my teens, I started talking with this girl on MySpace. I don't even remember how we became friends on there, because she lived in a completely different state, but it probably had to do with the fact that we were both going through this emo/punk phase. We'd talk every day and even got comfortable enough to exchange phone numbers and started talking on the phone. Then we started throwing around the word love. I was a dumb teenager and thought that I did have feelings for her, but really I didn't know her that well and was more infatuated with the idea of being star-crossed lovers or whatever, and it was nice having someone to talk to. We would always say how great it would be if we didn't live so far away from each other. One day she tells me she's coming to Chicago. At first I'm excited and we plan to meet up, but then on the day of I get second thoughts. I'd barely known this girl for like a month or so, and here she was, hundreds of miles from her home, coming to see me. It became much too real for me, and I was freaked out. So I stood her up. She called my phone and left voicemails and text messages, but I never returned them. I ignored her until I knew she was back home. I then said sorry to her in a message on MySpace and started distancing myself from her. I still feel terrible about it. We were just 2 lonely kids, and she went out of her way to see me, and I broke her heart. Back in college, I used to own an 11-foot-long, 40-pound albino Burmese python, Butters. I owned a fair bunch of reptiles around that time, but Butters was by far the biggest and gnarliest. Super tame, gorgeous, and ate fairly large rabbits once every other month-ish. The thing is, when you have a snake this size, part of the way you keep them being tame is by feeding them pre-killed food. The thrill of a snake taking down its prey can be an allure for some, and my 5 to 6 foot boas did that with rats, but not for the big boy. I took the responsible route and opted for pre-killed dinner to keep him staying sweet. The most humane and budget-friendly way to accomplish this was to use a rigid pole, in this case a honey stick, and place over the rabbit's neck, making sure to only get the neck under the stick. I would stand on it while simultaneously lifting the body up and away with a turn to snap the neck. Several pops, a few seconds of feet struggle, then just gone. Short of constructing a DIY CO2 euthanasia chamber, that's about all I had to work with. It did the trick and the rabbits suffered only very shortly. Arguably a much quicker death than being bitten and crushed to death by a giant reptile. First couple of ones were pretty rough for me. I broke down and cried a bit. Ultimately, I accepted my fate. I decided to care for this animal, so I'll do what needs to be done to give it proper care. I had a wonderful several years with Butters and my others before ultimately downsizing the stash. Found a wonderful home for Butters with a rescue shelter. They were thrilled about the massive living enclosure that came along with my donating him. So yeah, used to own a huge python, it ate rabbits, I had to snap the necks of the rabbits for the snake. Pre-killed food is ideal for huge snakes. I once hijacked a tricycle from a girl in pre-kindergarten. Had to assert my dominance. Were you in pre-K at the time, or was it like the girl was pre-K and you were 34? Oh, he meant today. He wrote this post while pedaling like the wind. I really hope that the original poster meant that he hijacked the trike when he was a small child, but then again, the alternative is just so gosh darn funny. I beat a man until he was blind in his left eye. Not a day goes by where I don't feel regret about it. Does this have a story, or do you just go around beating up left eyes? The dude was stealing from my truck and was whacked out on some substance. He seemed like a threat, but I pushed it way too far like a piece of crap. I still feel terrible about this one. This happened a lot when I was like 6 to 8 years old and my little brother was like 3 to 5. Whenever I did something bad and my parents found out about it, they would lock my brother and me in a room until one of us confessed. Usually the punishment would be a spanking. Since I hated being spanked, I would tell my brother that I would pay him a dime to say he did it. He, being so young that a dime seemed like a lot, would usually agree after little convincing. While he was being spanked in my parents' room, I would sneak into his room and break open his piggy bank — it was a Barney piggy bank that wasn't too hard for him to open — and would steal out like 50 cents plus a dime. After he would come back from getting spanked, I would give him his own dime back while keeping the 50 cents, and he would gleefully run to his Barney bank to make his deposit. My friend, let's call him A, and I were walking down the hall in school. Walking roughly 5 feet in front of us was this annoying freshman who was wearing a shirt that said "Cash" with a K on the back. So I asked my friend, "Why does his shirt have cash with a K?" The answer was, that's just how his name is spelled. And why did he shave his whole head? I think he had cancer. Is that cancer with a K? This is some relentless crap I should not have laughed at. Oh, for me, it's a tie between my top two. In high school, my homeroom teacher was this old Vietnam War vet who had severe PTSD. Being a lifelong military brat, you'd think I'd be sympathetic, but a wake and bake kind of impaired my judgment. I pulled the little firework out of a Christmas cracker. I lived in the UK at the time and brought it to class for no particular reason. In class, I got the guy sitting next to me to set off the little popper in an attempt to freak him out, hoping for a funny reaction. Instead, he just got really silent for the rest of the period and just stared into the distance the whole time. And number two, before I met my wife, I was set up on a blind date with a friend of a coworker. I met the girl and we talked. She wasn't really my type physically. I did my best to inform her of this gently, then proceeded to ask her if she had any friends that were my type that she could set me up with. She did, and that's how I met my wife. Strangled a boy in middle school because some of my friends said that he was talking crap behind my back. It was messed up because he started to vomit when I let him go, and he was crying real bad. I felt really bad that night and couldn't sleep. I apologized the next day and told him to strangle me to make amends, but he declined. I felt like I owed him something, so I let him borrow my PS1 for the weekend. We became good friends after that. Now it's the only way he can get hard. You're a monster. On a Friday night in high school, we had 50 cents left. Our parents were about to pick us up at the end of a night downtown, arcade and stuff. What could we do? We went through the phone book and grabbed an absolutely random person. We ordered them 2 pizzas with extra large, only anchovies, no cheese, to be delivered at 10 p.m. So that was 25 cents. With the last quarter, we ordered the same person 2 dozen roses with a note saying, "Sorry for the pizza," to be delivered at 10:15 p.m. What's your in-laws from hell story? Husband took his own life. In-laws took me to court over insurance money. Most insurance policies don't pay out in the event of someone taking their own life. However, SGLI through the military will pay out in almost all circumstances. I'm doing well these days and I haven't heard from them in a few years. There was a lot of harassment before it actually made it in front of a judge. Forged signatures on beneficiary update forms that were magically found after his death and hadn't ever been filed. It was thrown out pretty quickly, but not before lots of headaches and money down the drain to a thankfully great attorney. Obviously, they were crazy before this, but it really was the cherry on top. His dad was obsessed with trying to catch us doing the deed, going so far as having his own key cut for our house. He had our keys one day when he was waiting in for a workman for us. He would just barge in at any time, never knocked on doors, tried to often barge into the bathroom when it was being used, also liked me to catch him pleasuring himself, would wait until he knew we were a few minutes away. We often called them to let them know we were nearly there, and then he'd whip it out and go to town and looked me dead in the eye when I caught him. Creepiest man alive. We changed to the locks and reduced contacts. When partner and I split, he called me several times to offer a shoulder to cry on. No, thank you. The in-laws have been going through a rough time financially for a while, and my wife and I have been paying their credit card and parent loan for a couple of years. Father-in-law's parents passed this year, and he gets a large but not massive inheritance, around $75,000. We keep paying the bills because father-in-law is still not working full-time and he puts the inheritance away, so mother-in-law, who is horribly irresponsible with the money, can't access it. We just arrived on Christmas Eve and there's a Lexus sitting in the garage, paid for in cash, and now father-in-law is talking about how he wants a Cadillac. I'm so teed off that I haven't been able to sleep, and I don't want to frick up the holidays, so I'm biting my tongue until we leave, but there is no way we're paying the bills anymore. $5 says they'll react with, "But we need it! How can you be so selfish?" Don't cave. Remember how much that car cost. Remember they were saying in front of you, payer of their fricking bills, that they want a Cadillac. There's an important saying that one should never ascribe to malice what can be explained by stupidity, and I think that probably applies here. Hopefully they saw reason and accepted the solution with grace. My mother wore all black to our wedding, complete with a black hat with a hanging black mesh to cover her face like she was in mourning. This made me laugh. So melodramatic. Does she always act like this? I'm low-key in love with passive-aggressive antics from family. My entire extended family is so melodramatic, I'm running out of popcorn. After driving almost 11 hours with husband to see in-laws, mother-in-law accused me of keeping her son away from her, and how I'm not ever gonna let her see her son again, to my face and started crying in front of multiple adults and children. The next day, when I asked to speak with her to let her know that what she did was a little unreasonable and very hurtful to me, she showed her true colors and went from crying victim to screaming viciously at me and trying to hit me. She screamed me and husband, her son, out of the house and threw the gifts we had bought her out of the door like pieces of trash. I cannot believe this is the woman who gave birth to my husband. She's like she's from another species. She sounds slightly mentally unstable. She just sounds very manipulative, playing the victim for the audience and getting mad when she realizes she's not getting what she wants. My mother-in-law said we could have the wedding at the place she works, for free, otherwise the venue would cost upwards of $7,000 just to rent out. She decided that gave her free license to plan everything to her specifications, including the date, what we would eat, the flowers, what we would drink, and even what music I'd have at my wedding. She invited more people to the wedding than me and my husband combined. To top it off, she refused to watch my husband's son on our wedding night, saying that he would feel rejected if he wasn't allowed to stay with us. Each thing happened by itself, and it wasn't until they all added up that I realized my wedding had been hijacked, under the guise of, "That's how it needs to be if you're going to have it at my place of work," which was bullcrap. She just wanted to control everything. My husband called her out on it later, and she's reduced her meddling to almost zero now. Thank goodness. This happened to me exactly. She always used to ask, I'm divorced now, why we didn't have wedding photos displayed. Because I hated being reminded of that day never seemed like a very nice response. My soon-to-be mother-in-law devoted an inordinate amount of time petitioning the state to allow her son to be remanded into her custody for a day to attend my wedding. He was in jail awaiting trial for fighting a cop and nurse after getting picked up for drunk and disorderly. He was denied bail because he was currently on probation from previous alcohol-fueled shenanigans, theft and assault, and was looking at a nickel once he finally got a court date. She wouldn't listen to my wife and I when we asked her to stop, so we had to write our own letter to the Department of Corrections letting them know we would have an open bar at the reception and it would be a really bad idea if my brother-in-law was in attendance. We showed him pictures and videos 4 years later when he got out, the first time. Fun fact, my brother-in-law is the reason I'm on first-name basis with the local sheriffs in his hometown, as for the first 3 years I dated his sister, there wasn't a family function that he, the brother-in-law, attended where they didn't get called out. Out of curiosity, how's the brother-in-law doing now? Today he's walking around on parole as a convicted felon, carrying the balance of a 20-year sentence over his head, and someone is waiting for him to break parole. The problem is that he's definitely got a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on. When he's sober, he's one of the kindest, most generous, and most noble human beings you'll ever meet. But as soon as he starts drinking, it's all downhill from there. One of the first times I ever met him, he literally, as in took it off and handed it to me, gave me the shirt off his back so that I could make a good impression on their grandparents. He then proceeded to get so drunk that emergency services had to be called, which set the tone for the next 15 years of our brother's by-marriage relationship. I care deeply for the guy and do what I can to help him and his kids, but he doesn't have my home address for a reason. To answer the original question, he's getting his next 30-day chip next week, and we're all really proud of him. Again, I personally am hoping he sticks with it this time. This isn't as out there as some of the overtly rude in-laws, but mine were so utterly self-absorbed, insular, and lacking in social skills that I was literally ignored throughout most of my early encounters with them. They had a family culture which they all buy into, in which my father-in-law is the center of everything. The only family pictures in the house were of him, none of the 3 kids, all food was prepared to his tastes, and he had no concept of other people's needs or feelings. Initially, I felt utterly rejected and disapproved of, because who goes to dinner again and again with people and is never asked one question, not even, "How are you?" It took me a long time to realize that they just had no idea how to interact with other people because they lived in this complete bubble. To this day, my father-in-law treats every conversation as an opportunity to change the topic to himself, no matter how outside of his experience it is. But I realized that they never cared enough about me to bother to disapprove of me. That being said, my father-in-law's levels of narcissism are so great that he sees slights and digs at him in a lot of my Facebook posts and unfriends me because he couldn't bear the idea that I wasn't considering his feelings with every thought I shared, as he's so accustomed to everyone catering to his needs all the time. I'm sure I was supposed to be wounded to have no longer been in his good graces, but I just laughed. I think he is genuinely and cluelessly taken aback when he's not considered the most important and greatest person in the room. My mother-in-law refers to all of her daughters-in-law as son's first wife. She gave me used stationery for Christmas. Want more? She wore a white dress to my brother-in-law's wedding rehearsal dinner and interrupted, then stopped the best man's toast so that the soup wouldn't get cold. She told me that I'm a horrible mother for not sending my kids outside to play unsupervised all summer, like she did in the 70s where mums would kick the kids out, lock the doors, and tell kids not to come home until dinner. I nearly died after having my first child, and she told me that God was telling me I'm not fit to be a mum of more kids. After we had our second, she told me that I had my hands full and had no business having a third. After my third child, she told me I had too many children for anyone to ever want to babysit. By the way, she has 3 kids. I keep a very clean house, but I have 3 young boys. They're messy. Before brother-in-law and sister-in-law came to visit one time, she sent a cleaning crew ahead to clean my house so that it would be up to their standards. He's the golden child. Father-in-law lives with us 6 months a year while he collects butterflies for his book. He pays no rent and runs up our utility bills with no thought about it. When we ask him to clean up after himself, he says he didn't realize he'd made such a mess, but thought it was my job as an at-home mum to clean up after the men. He's not invited back for 2016. When she comes to our house to see the kids, I regularly tell her not to get involved in our laundry. She always ignores me, goes through our closets, rifles through our stuff, and then makes comments about what she finds. To be clear, my husband always stands up to her. I was the one who constantly tried to repair their relationship. I finally gave that up last year. We're now essentially no contact with them, and they are not allowed in our house. To talk to the kids on the phone without us supervising, and phone calls are only on holidays. And now, after reading this, the narrator has decided to thoroughly stalk and vet individuals before any deepening of relationship going forward. Who would want a monster like this in their life? Where do I start? My mother-in-law and my grandmother-in-law are both weird about food. A few years ago, Grandma left a turkey to defrost on the counter. For 4 days. My sister-in-law came over, almost fell down due to the smell. Grandma said the turkey needed to be at room temperature for the enzymes to develop. My sister-in-law had to bag it, toss it, and scrub down the kitchen to make it fit for humans again. My mother-in-law had a big dinner one year. Rather than use paper plates, she used real ones. She had about 50 people or so. We didn't go, but about a week later or so we were over. There was lots of snow on the ground and my dogs were out in the yard. One of them kept going over to a snowdrift and digging and digging. We went to see what was up. The plates were all buried in the snow. Rather than run them a bunch at a time through the dishwasher, she left them outside and they were covered by snow. So, service for 50 people, filthy, left outside for a week. No wonder my dog wouldn't leave that snowdrift alone. Nothing says loving like week-old roast beef stuck to a plate in the snowdrift. Last one for now, Grandma was supposed to get a bottle of pickled peppers yesterday, as part of her Christmas gift. In the general chaos of kids and everything, the bottle, still wrapped, broke. It was all mopped up and tossed. We told her, sorry, we'll get you another one. Her response, why did you throw it away? We told her it was broken and the glass was all over the food. She told us we could have washed off the peppers and still eaten them. We told her, no, you'd die, and she refused to believe that. And this is why I never, ever, ever, ever eat anything these people cook. Not ever, not at all. So much to tell, but I'll just say that every once in a while, me and my wife have had to deal with a wellness check from the police because her parents call and tell the police they haven't heard from their daughter in weeks, even though they talked to her the other day. And they also say I'm one of those people who would chop my wife into pieces. Luckily, my step-uncle is a lieutenant in the sheriff's office, and the last time they got a call from the chief telling them to stop. I state I wanted to host Thanksgiving, and I invite all the family. Mother-in-law then invites everyone to her house and not us. Found out when I started calling sisters to firm up plans the week before. Also, the only family member not invited to a niece's baby shower. So done caring after 36 years of being the last invited or not being invited at all. Of course, we always get invited to the work parties. Okay, so my mother-in-law at the time of the story was about 350 pounds. She chain-smoked these terrible all-black cigarettes that were longer and thinner than normal cigarettes, and smelled like death, and she would only wear polyester muumuus that she bought in the 70s. Her voice sounded exactly like Roz from Monsters, Inc., and the only things she would talk about were how hard it was to find a new muumuu, or how her channeling was going, and what the various spirits had to say. The first time I met my mother-in-law, she sat me down and started talking to me about the energies that spoke to her from the Pleiades. As she was telling me about how they were going to fix the world, I realized that to her the Pleiades was one place, a bunch of space lights that were all very close to each other, because they're close together from our point of view. When I, in my naivete, tried to explain to her that the stars that make up the constellation are in fact an enormous distance apart, and some of them don't exist anymore, she just scowled at me, shook her head and said, "No," and kept talking. Later that night, my wife and I were awoken by a huge commotion and we found her drunkenly destroying the kitchen. When we asked her what she was doing, she said, "The energies need a burrito." so he made her a burrito and sent her to bed. In conclusion, my mother-in-law is an insane, drunken chain smoker who only wears polyester muumuus and channels the spirits of the aliens who live in the Pleiades, who want a burrito. At my wedding, after the ceremony, our new mother-in-law started yelling at my husband because he made a joke to his father. She then proceeded to storm off, dragging his sisters with her. After about 5 minutes, her F-buddy of the week stomped over and just started going off on my husband for being disrespectful. I was almost certain my reception was going to turn into a brawl. 3 years later, she still hasn't apologized. Oh, where can I start? Gave my 7-month-year-old a scale for her first Christmas so she wouldn't get fat like me. Told my husband that he wasn't allowed to get a vasectomy because he might want kids with his next wife. Told me I was gross and that she didn't know why her son would want to come home to me. The night our daughter was born, she berated my husband for giving our daughter the ugliest name she had ever heard. My grandmother's name and his grandmother's name. Told my mother my name was ridiculous and ugly. This year she cancelled Thanksgiving and Christmas to try and teach us some weird lesson. It was fabulous. I could honestly go on, but she is just a bitter old lady. Called me by the ex-wife's name for a couple of years, and it wasn't as if hubby's first marriage even lasted a year. During visits, if I admired anything in her home, I was told, "You can't have it." I wasn't allowed to do chores to help out. She even took my husband's pants out of my hands when I was doing laundry and pre-treated them with Tilex. Ruined them, but I was to blame for rushing her. If I brought presents for her, I was extravagant. If I did not, I was cheap. If I asked about the family, I was a busybody. If I didn't know the details, I was uncaring. My cooking was all wrong, i.e. healthier than hot brown, overcooked, fatty, salt-laden mystery foods. My best Christmas present from her was an acrylic angel with the wrong birthstone from the dollar clearance bin. She kept giving me angel stuff, and I'm not even remotely religious. If I made suggestions, I was greedy and critical. We now live far away and no time or money to go visit. Sorry. My in-laws weren't terribly interested in me until I got pregnant. Suddenly, they were all about being in my business. They flooded us with unwanted advice and terrifying stories. I stopped giving my sons formula at 3 months because it was too expensive and they're fine. Or when told that the hospital checks our car seat before release, I remember bringing our oldest home from the hospital in my lap and he's fine. Mind you, I'm the same age as their oldest, car seats existed, and people like them are probably the reason the hospitals check now. Anyway, this escalated to invading personal space, which included talking to and kissing my belly, even before I had a bump. No matter how many times we told them not to do it, my mother-in-law would swoop in like a ninja when I least expected it. Come wintertime, I had a good-sized baby bump and a maternity coat to cover it. We were leaving the in-laws' house and I already had my coat zipped up, smugly thinking I'd found a way to defend myself. Much to my horror, she starts pawing at the bottom of my jacket and attempts to yank it up. When that doesn't work, she bends over and tries to kiss below the coat, completely misses the bump, and plants one right on the front of my pelvis. I'm frozen, going, "Your mother just kissed my VV," over and over. My husband says, "What the frick, ma?" She just shrugs, says she doesn't care, and walks away. 0 fricks given. Later, my husband negotiated that she just blows kisses from that point forward. Otherwise, I refused to see them. In conclusion, my mother-in-law tried to kiss my baby bump and instead planted one on my hoo-ha. I will note that I've tried to spread out the various charges against different kinds of in-laws, but upwards of 90% of these stories have been mothers-in-law. They just seem to be the most likely kind of crazy to get up in their children's spouse's business, I suppose. Cousins-in-law came to Thanksgiving the day after we buried my grandmother. They ignore her husband of 58 years who's sitting at the table, don't offer any condolences to any family members, and complain when we dedicate the goats to grandma, and not their 4th child with the 3rd husband. Also called me ignorant for not knowing who the American Idol winner was this year. The only saving grace here is that my wife knows how crazy her mum is and has gone no contact with her. Here are some things that happened in no particular order. The big one, father-in-law, who's a pretty good guy, has MS and is basically bedridden. Mother-in-law has been consistently misdosing him on his medication, including giving him sedatives that she's gotten from somewhere. Her adult daughter and her husband moved in to help renovate the house to something that's more handicap accessible for my father-in-law. They spent nearly $20,000 in renovations, remodel and redecoration, along with new appliances for the kitchen. Without warning, my mother-in-law served them with an eviction notice, giving them 3 days to vacate. They live about 2 hours away. In the past 10 years, she's made 2 trips to actually see my daughter. There have been 3 or 4 more trips for things like going to garage sales, where she's made an hour or so visit as part of the trip. For my first Christmas with the extended family, she forgot to buy me a gift, so she went to the freezer and got me a summer sausage that had been in there for nearly 4 years. Nothing says welcome to the family like a ruined, frozen, smoked meat. For another Christmas, I got a giant bottle of Listerine and some toothbrushes. Mother-in-law works at the dentist office and liberated these gifts for me. She saved a ham in the refrigerator to make ham and potato soup. The ham had been in the fridge, not the freezer, for nearly 3 months, and she was still going to use it for the soup. Mother-in-law is making tons of money in land royalties from fracking. Sister-in-law recently saw a royalty check from the oil company and it was over $900,000. Yet mother-in-law won't spend any of that money to refurbish the house or pay someone to provide the kind of care that my father-in-law needs. She's all kinds of fricked up. Not technically my mother-in-law yet, but told me her daughter wasn't ready for a ring after we'd already picked it out and she was asking me when she was going to get it. A few months later, she was contemplating a cross-country move and said to my face if she left, there was no one here that her daughter would stay for. First words to her daughter when she told her of our pregnancy were, "How could you be so stupid? My fiancé is 30, we're doing well, live in the same place, and are due in August. Cut the cord with the mother-in-law." To clarify a bit, my husband was 12 to 16 and watched her alcoholic dad beat her mum. Her mum would in turn get in bed with her or sleep in her room to ride it out for the night. At 18, they divorced, and she went 5 years and received her master's. Came home and has been living with mum since. There is a bond, albeit unhealthy, that neither wants to break. Her mum is lonely, clinically depressed, and suffers from severe anxiety disorder. I've given her every option to slowly get away, which she seems to have no intention of doing. Our relationship is suffering, and I'm not really sure where it's heading. What I do know is that no matter the outcome, I will be the best father to my child that I can be. Actually building the baby's crib today. My in-laws came from a very, very rich family. They're rich enough to take a helicopter ride to another city in order to avoid traffic congestion. This one year, they told us to wait for them before starting dinner because they would like to join us. They promised to arrive at 7 p.m. They finally arrived at 9:15 p.m. 15 minutes later, they left, sister-in-law saying she wasn't feeling well and would like to return to their hotel to rest. We waited more than 2 hours for a 15-minute appearance act. Everyone was teed off. Oh boy, my time to shine. This will be a series of short stories. A little background. First, I'm Mexican-American and my wife is white. Also, her parents are divorced. 1. After she met me, her mother took my then-girlfriend into the kitchen and said she was dating below her. 2. After he first met me, my father was asked by his family what I was like. He only said, "He's a wetback." 3. Since I have now graduated from college, law school, passed the bar exam, and become a practicing attorney, my mother-in-law constantly belittles my wife. Most recently, during dinner, she stated that my wife has lowered her prestige in light of my accomplishments despite my race. 4. When my mother-in-law and her husband visited us for the first time after we got married, we found them in our bedroom uninvited and they were searching for something on our bed. We finally heard their hushed tones and realized they were looking for stains on the sheets. 5. The mother-in-law wanted us to all go to a small town in Alabama to see her family for Thanksgiving. So we went, me a little anxious about what to expect. It was a very awkward experience. I think I might have been the first Mexican they'd ever seen, and then we had Thanksgiving dinner. A relative started describing this program the city initiated, where people can provide aluminium cans in lieu of payment for bus fare. Mother-in-law's husband says, "Beer cans too? Y'all are going to be seeing a ton of Mexicans on the buses." Everyone fell on the floor laughing. My wife and I could only stare at each other in disbelief. 6. This Thanksgiving, mother-in-law and husband invited their contractor to dinner. He's from Colombia and has no family here, so I thought they were being friendly. When he arrived, husband kept trying to get us to speak Spanish to each other because us, being Spanish speakers, we would basically be family. When introducing him, mother-in-law said, "He's from Colombia, but we don't call him a terrorist," and started laughing. What was something you thought was grossly exaggerated until it happened to you? General anesthesia. 3, 2, 1, and suddenly I'm being moved to the recovery room. I always thought it was kinda cool how a 6-hour surgery can feel like 2 seconds when under anesthesia. The only time I was old enough to remember going under general anesthesia was to get my wisdom teeth out a few years ago. I was freaking out and one nurse had to console me as I was getting the substances put in my system. I started to feel it and it made everything feel better, kinda like the initial effect of morphine, and I remember doing a little dance on the chair and going, "Yeah, let's get this party started." And then it was 2 hours later and it was over. I always thought I could fight it. You cannot fight it.
This was the scariest thing. I'd always imagined it would be like being asleep or being passed out, where you wouldn't feel anything or even be aware of sensory stimulation, but you would at least have some sense that time was passing. Nope, it's like a light switch. Off, on.
Kidney stones. They're for real. I was out of the country and on an excursion, if you will. Actually, when I felt something weird about 3 inches up and to the right of my belly button. I didn't have back pains until later. When I got back into town, the pain had gotten a little worse and I thought nothing of it. The next day I woke up and it was more sharp pain, so I went to the local hospital and they did a sonogram to check me out. Spleen, appendix, and whatever else they checked for came back fine. They gave me some Vicodin and sent me on my way. I took these daily and was okay, but every once in a while I took a jolt which nearly brought me to my knees, but then went away. Fast forward to coming home. Was on the plane back and started having sharp pains again. Went to the restroom and peed what looked like cranberry juice. Had a small panic attack and went back to my seat and took the Vicodin. Still had 6 hours of flight time left. Was freaking out the whole way home. Back in the States, I went straight to the hospital and they couldn't figure it out. Told them about the sono and no kidney infection. I could see the concerned look on my doctor's face. So they did a CT scan. A couple of hours later, my doctor calls, "I have good news, it's only kidney stones." My initial reaction was, frick, if that's good news, what did you think was wrong with me? Anyway, the report came back TMC, too many to count. I had hundreds all over my kidney, but had a 9mm one stuck in my ureter. That night it moved and I was laying on the bathroom floor throwing up and couldn't move because of the pain. I thought I was dying, worst pain I could physically ever be in. My father had to come pick me up off the floor and take me to the hospital in the back of his Tahoe. They performed a lithotripsy, which isn't a walk in the park either. And went home that afternoon after passing 3 stones and who knows how many blood clots from the procedure. Since then I've passed 2 more that were small but still painful. I've not yet had these up to this point in my life and I live in eternal fear. Let's see how we go. Getting older. Aches, pains, less energy, more responsibilities. Never thought it would happen to me. In a similar vein, how much time speeds up as you get older. I'm 40 in a few months. This year it felt like it went January, February, April, December.
Oh god, you're telling me. Seriously, where the frick did 2014 go? Also, 2013 for that matter. I feel like it should still be 2012 to be honest.
Sunburns. I'm a brown guy and honestly, I thought my white friends were being dramatic about their sunburns. Then I decided to go fishing for 6 hours without any sunscreen. Oh yeah, sunburns suck.
Dude, one time I got so sunburned I couldn't wear clothes for 3 days. I had to ask friends to bring food to my place because I couldn't go outside without clothes. When I woke up, the creases of the sheets would be imprinted onto my dry skin for hours. The very touch of air hurt my skin. It was one of the most painful experiences in my life. I developed a whole galaxy of freckles on my shoulders overnight. I came this close to skin cancer, I swear. I thought people who called in sick or whatever when they threw out their backs were sissies. Then I threw out my back. Holy heck, it hurt to do pretty much anything. I threw out my back and had bronchitis at the same time, the only time I truly wanted to die. At the ripe old age of 19, I started throwing my back out 2 to 3 times a year due to a congenital back problem. Thanks, genetics. I still brace myself every time I have to cough or sneeze, whether I'm having a good day or not. There's nothing quite like the hot, stabbing pain that radiates down through your legs and out the bottom of your heels. My dad threw out his trumpeting once. I didn't know whether to laugh or feel bad for him. Insomnia. Not being able to sleep is fricking maddening. When I was younger, I thought there was no way this could actually be a serious problem. I was wrong. Welcome to my world. What is even worse is if your significant other totally sleeps fine. Ugh. Watching someone else sleep like a little lamb while you're exhausted and still awake is infuriating.
That was me every time I had a sleepover. Like, how the frick did you fall asleep in 5 minutes? Then I'm awake for another hour or two just thinking about how much I want to strangle everyone who can fall asleep in under 2 hours. Black ice. I had a suspicion it was mostly something people blamed for careless driving. Then I finally ran into some. Didn't crash or anything, but honestly thought my brakes failed until I parked, stepped out of the car, and nearly fell from the slipperiness. Black ice is some scary crap. Last year, some poor woman launched her car off an overpass after hitting black ice. I pass under this bridge on my daily commute, and it's about a 50-foot drop. She actually walked away from the crash, so she was okay, but my gosh, can you imagine? I would have been dead anyway from the heart attack. On a related note, snow tires. I moved from Arizona to Montana in December. I'm not a very smart person. My dad told me to buy snow tires before departing, but I couldn't find any in Arizona, oddly enough, and concluded my all seasons would be fine. I read a bunch of tutorials about driving on ice before taking off, and I got really good at pumping my brakes about halfway through Utah. Finally, in Idaho, I gave up and decided to try snow tires. I thought it would be a waste of money and wouldn't make a difference. I was wrong. As soon as the snow tires were on, I suddenly had full control of my car again. In conclusion, my dad was right. I always thought hearing adults talk about their nieces and nephews like they were such a huge part of their lives was stupid. I barely know any of my aunts or uncles or cousins or whatever, so it always seems like they were just playing the niece card to make it seem like they have more responsibilities than they really do. Now, I still don't have any nieces or nephews, but my mum married a guy with a pregnant ex-wife when I was 15, and I tell you, that kid is my girl. I've changed my entire lifestyle, my opinions, and how I treat others and the future because of the responsibility I feel towards being there for her and setting a good example. I love her to death. I want to be a role model and live my life in a way that she can be proud of one day. I never realized what it felt like to watch a little baby grow up into a brilliant kid, or how important a child can be in your life even if they're not yours. And she's not even my blood. I get it now. Falling in love. Lemony Snicket sums it up perfectly. One of the remarkable things about love is that despite very irritating people writing poems and songs about how pleasant it really is quite pleasant. The day some sappy love song comes on and you're like, yeah, I get what they're talking about. How painful a badly cramping muscle is. I didn't buy it, then I had one when swimming one day, and I actually thought I was going to drown. My wake-up call one morning was a double hamstring plus a calf cramp. I don't know the odds of that happening, but my gosh, it was terrible. Eat a frickin' banana. All y'all motherfrickers need potassium. Vertigo. Oh my gosh, it's a nightmare. It really is. The first time I got it, it completely blindsided me. First thing in the morning, I opened my eyes and the horizon became vertical, which would have been amazing if I didn't feel like crap a millisecond later. Becoming dizzy really doesn't do vertigo justice. I literally watched the world rotate 90 degrees. Then I just had to wait until it stopped. Sleep paralysis. It's like my eyes were awake, but my brain was still asleep. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't breathe. The harder I tried to regain my breath, the harder it was to breathe. I knew it was pitch black in my room, but it was like everything was strobing colors, like dark, very deep colors, and there was a deep ringing in my ears. It only happened to me once, and it was terrifying. Sleep paralysis is the worst. The first time it happened to me, I had no clue what was going on, and I remember thinking I was dead, and I remember trying to scream, but couldn't. And the more I struggled to move or scream, the worse it felt. I've had it happen a few times since then, and since now I know what it is, I honestly just lay there until it passes. My sister was in a car accident over 15 years ago and still freaks out when a car gets too close. I thought it was just her being stupid until I was hit by a drunk driver. Now whenever I'm a passenger, I get really nervous and freak out if someone doesn't look like they're going to stop or like they're going to hit us. A panic attack. The movies show it as an almost humorous exaggeration of the severity, or so I thought, and then it happened to me. I realized those movies were absolutely horrible. Yeah, the panic attacks in the show Ted Lasso are actually about some of the most real depictions of this kind of event that I've seen in media so far. They are harrowing. Also, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, watch Ted Lasso. How hard it really is to just find a job, let alone one that pays for you to have a comfortable life. Wait, it gets worse. You'll soon find out that a lot of the people that have those jobs are lazy, incompetent fricks who for some reason or another are immune from being fired. Especially now that you have to apply online everywhere. I was spending at least 15 hours online a week for months, filling out tedious applications while my savings dwindled. One day my mum says, "If you spend half as much time looking for a job as you did on that computer..." Oh man, I lost my freaking mind. I explained it, but to this day she doesn't get it. Even when I found work, I had 2 jobs where it ended up costing me money to even show up, and I had one where I was just barely breaking even. Not to mention 20 or so interviews of, "We'll call you," and all that freaking bullcrap. Wasting my gas driving all the way wherever, getting all dressed up and doing the "I'll suck whatever you want me to suck" dance. Frick that crap. If I'm ever unemployed again, I'll use my last chunk of cash to hire a hitman to perforate my trachea with a rusty screwdriver. I hate when people who've not had to do a job search or even been in the workforce for 15 years try to give you advice for finding a job. You just want to shake them and yell, "It isn't like that anymore." The whole system is different. The advice you're giving me is outdated and basically worthless. Bad period cramps. For those who don't know, cramps can vary in pain level with age. When I was younger, I thought I just had awesome pain tolerance or that cramps really weren't that bad, as I've had a lot of painful experiences. Broken bones, chronic migraines, tears, sprains, strains, slips, the lot, and been okay. Then it all went to heck. For 1 day a month, I'm literally in too much pain to stand up straight. I have to stamp my feet on the floor to keep from crying out if I'm for some reason able to get myself vertical and my feet to the floor. If I'm lucky enough to have the day off, I curl up around the toilet and just cry because I'm in so much pain I want to throw up. But since throwing up won't make me feel better, I just lay there hugging Ralph the big white phone for moral support. It's so painful I can't think. It's easily at the same pain level as a bad migraine or throwing my back out, both of which I've experienced. Holy frick, ouch. The kind of depression that makes it physically impossible to pull yourself out of bed in the morning. Putting down a pet. I held my best friend of 13 years' head in my hands as he slowly slipped away from me. It's been weeks and I still can't get past it. I've lost people I'm close to, and it didn't touch how hard this was. He wasn't just a dog, he was a family member. My cuddle buddy who slept in my bed with me every night from the time he was a puppy. I don't want another dog ever again. I just want my boy back. I would give up anything I have or ever will have to have him back. I miss you and I love you, Link. Toxic relationships. I always got mad at my cousin for not leaving a guy who horribly mistreated her, and then got into a similar relationship and it was really hard to get out. People are also unsympathetic to child mistreatment that spills over into adulthood. People always say, you should have moved out earlier, or even worse, they're your family, you should forgive them for what happened in the past. No, it still happens whenever I see them. I won't forgive a life of mistreatment. No one would say anything like that to someone who'd escaped a terrible partner. My mother had complete control over me and had even raised me to think she could read my mind at all times. It sounds stupid now, but when that's all you've ever known, it can be difficult to change the way you think. I never misbehaved as a teen, yet I was always a problem child, and my mother still tells the story of my life in terms of my anger issues and attitude problems. I wasn't allowed to go out even when I was 20. I wasn't allowed to work at all, to the point where I'm now panicking almost nightly about getting a job. I was yelled at, hit, and subtly insulted to the point where I have no confidence in anything I do, even though objectively I know I'm capable of dealing with a lot. I have nightmares most nights about being trapped back at home. I get really jumpy when I travel alone because I was actively taught that women like me get taken advantage of for being stupid enough to go out without other people for protection. It really hurts too when people expect 20 years of horrible treatment to be fixed by 2 years with lower contact with the one who mistreated me. My friends get mad at me for being overly sensitive when they tease me jokingly. I was traumatized with similar techniques. It would just be nice if more people around me understood what it's like. The pain of getting cheated on, consequently realizing you can't trust a person who you've given your heart to. I thought it was so dramatic and a call for attention when I heard other people complain about relationship problems. Little did I realize it was literally like a knife stabbing you in the chest. This. When I found out my ex was cheating on me and got one of the girls, there were multiple girls, pregnant, I literally collapsed on the floor in the middle of my dorm room. I have never and will never bawl again like I did then. I cried every day, multiple times a day. People would say the usual, "Hey, how are you?" and I would lose it. Never have experienced pain like that. My first girlfriend, who I was with for almost 2 years, cheated on me, and that crap cuts you up way worse and in so many more ways than you're led to believe. There's the obvious feeling of betrayal, and then there's everything it does to your confidence, and the fact that you feel like you can never trust anyone ever again, not just a significant other, but also friends who could have known, and then there's more deep-rooted crap like how emasculating it is, or what people who knew it had happened before you did must have thought about you. And then you're going to start going around in circles feeling like a bad person because all you care about is your place as a man and so on and so forth. My ex actually introduced me to the guy she cheated on me with between the time it happened and the time that I found out. Even the slightest thought of what he must have thought of me at that point makes me want to flip my crap. Never cheat and never be the person that someone cheats on someone with. That crap doesn't just cut you up, it changes you for life. How loud small arms are. I knew intellectually that they were noisy, but unconsciously assumed they were a movie or video game volume. Went to a firing range and shot a variety of them. Even with ear protection, they still feel overpoweringly loud, and it's clear as day you'd damage your hearing if you fired them without taking any safety precautions. Can't look at most movie gunfights the same again. Also, I had earplugs in and those gun range earmuffs over the top. Also, how hard it is to hit anything, especially with a smaller weapon like a gat. You think you're properly aiming down the sights, then you fire, there's a big flash and it kicks back in your hand, and you look at the target and realize you were way off. And that's taking your time in a controlled environment. I couldn't imagine trying to be accurate under pressure while trying to hit a small moving target, not without a crap load of training. Yep, being at an indoor range is one of the most disorienting experiences a man or woman can subject themselves to. I'm pretty sure that even with the proper protection, all regular patrons must need hearing aids later in life. Just Texas. Alright, I'm being a smart aleck, but I'm also being very truthful. I've lived in a number of different places because I was a military brat and a vagabond, and I've encountered a hell of a number of different people. As an adult, moving to Texas surprised me. I thought I'd find it had been exaggerated, but the appetites, the personalities, the pride, all of it are bigger in Texas. They fricking love their state.
The pain you feel when and after eating a ghost pepper. I thought people on YouTube were just exaggerating to get views.
I have an Indian flatmate who cooks with those. She must be immune because the other day I came in after work and suddenly it was like I'd walked into a cloud of napalm. I was on my knees coughing and crying and she just looked down from the pan and rolled her eyes. It's not that bad. I thought I was going to die. Obsessive-compulsive disorder. I remember as a kid watching one of those MTV True Life documentaries about people with OCD and thinking about how ridiculous it was. I mean, why can't these people just not wash their hands 50 times a day? Why can't they just lock the door once and be done with it? A few years later, when I was around 16, I started to develop some strange habits. For instance, if I heard even just 1 second of any song on my iPod, I would have to listen to the rest of the song in its entirety, down to the last second. So if said song ended and I didn't get my iPod paused before the next song started, I would have to listen to that song in its entirety. These were the first signs of horrible things to come. Over the next 5 years or so, my OCD manifested into almost every facet of my life in different ways. The compulsions would get more and more complex to the point where I would spend hours trying to fix it. Life was miserable and every day was a challenge. I could go on all day about the different compulsions and manifestations, but this is already the longest post I've ever made. I did get better for the most part, it's not ruining my life anymore, and it's pretty dormant most of the time, but every now and then it creeps up and tries to bite me. I've learned to fight it pretty well though.
The happiness of a stable, healthy, loving long-term relationship.
I wish this were higher up in the list. My significant other and I periodically ask each other, when does it get hard? Because we're both from dysfunctional families. We've both accomplished so much because we support each other in a way I didn't know was possible. The nights we check out of adulthood to make pillow forts and eat ice cream for dinner make me feel like we're in Calvin and Hobbes.
I've been told by cynical people, oh, you're still in the honeymoon phase? You'll start having fights soon. Like we're just too dumb to get into fights yet. We've been married 6.5 years exactly today, and we've been living together for more than 9 years. I think if we were going to start fighting, we'd have done it by now. Literally not a single fight in that entire time. Not to me, but to a very close friend, getting taken advantage of on a date. She simply wasn't the same person anymore. She went into a shell and refused to even seek help. It took almost 2 years of convincing her to take her to a therapist, and 3 years after that for her to almost come back to her old self. But even now, she refuses to trust men. Getting a bad, we're talking 2nd or 3rd degree, burn. I've broken 3 bones, gotten a multitude of concussions, had surgery and much more, but when I got 2nd and 3rd degree burns on my chest, nothing compared. The pain is unending and you can't escape it. You know in movies when that scary monster or psycho murderer is coming for a character and they just freeze in their tracks? You start yelling at the screen, "Run away, moron!" Yeah, well, that totally happens if you get scared enough. Your whole body just freezes to the spot even when you desperately want to run. It's horrible. Walking home from the bus in middle school, I had to pass this enormous Rottweiler that lived in a small yard enclosed in a 3-foot fence. Not nearly enough to keep it in. The dog would bark furiously from the moment it saw me until I went out of sight. I was terrified every day. I generally like dogs, but there was no question that this one could maul me. Well, the inevitable happened and it jumped the fence. I tried to scream, tried to run, but couldn't do anything but cry. It was awful. I couldn't attract anyone's attention or help myself. I felt so scared and alone. Like you, I always thought it would be easy to get myself out of danger. It's not. Lucky for me, the Rottweiler wanted to only lick my hands and get a little pat. But man, was I scared. What was your funniest time walking in on somebody in the buff? I work at McDonald's, and one day while I was handing a woman her food, I saw that she was in the middle of sending naughty pictures of herself. When I was living in New Zealand, one night my roommate brought home a guy from a bar, and they did the deed on the couch. It just so happened that the couch was on the opposite side of the wall from my bed, so I heard it all. But that's besides the point. The next morning I woke up to a text from a different roommate saying that there was a clothless guy on the couch. I casually went to the bathroom to sneak a peek, and there he was, all in his glory, passed out on the couch. The roommate who brought him home was nowhere to be found. We later found her curled up on the bathroom floor, also in the buff. And now they're married. The end. That's not how you do a one-night stand at all. As a kid, I always went to summer camp in a different state, and we would often take multi-day canoe trips around the general area. On one of these trips, after a long day of paddling down a river, the trip leader decided to stop on an island and set up camp for the night. As the day progressed, the sunshine turned to rain, and before we knew it, it was a full-on monsoon. As me and a bunch of other boys huddled under a tarp, someone pointed out two people swimming on the other side of the river. We noticed it's two guys and a girl and continue to watch. Before we know it, the girl stands up, revealing she is completely clothless. In fact, all three were skinny dipping. Being teenage boys, we decided to yell and wave at them, asking if they'd like any s'mores, while taking turns looking through the binoculars. We thought they would be embarrassed. However, they weren't fazed by this, and one of the dudes began to swim over. I'll never forget his face as he got closer and realized we were a bunch of little kids. Needless to say, we gave him a s'more. In conclusion, saw an unclothed river girl and fed an equally stark-as man a s'more.
I have a similar story. Me and my family were floating down a local river. This place is a real party every day in summer. Anyway, we get to this one corner, and there's this girl flashing both banks of the river. Of course, all the guys yell in appreciation, and here I am, a 15-year-old kid with his parents, heading to the end of our floating trip, and my mum is trying to get my attention. Finally, she says, "Jake, they aren't even a very good bosom." Without skipping a beat, I turn to her and say, "Mom, they're still a bosom." I swear my dad shed a tear when I said that.
Sort of accidental. When I was in high school, I lived with my dad. Our house had a pool and a hot tub, and Pops was a randy old hound. He was shooping it to what seemed like all the divorced ladies in my neighborhood. Being single, well off, and having a hot tub really greased the wheels. Anyway, he and his girlfriends weren't exactly incognito, and after a few drinks tended to come in and out of the house, where I was, in varying states of undress, to use the bathroom and get refills or snacks. Let's just say that I saw many more of my friends' mums than was polite to discuss.
Well, at least it made for some decent online trash talk.
Yeah, well, my dad fricked your mom. Yet another video where the subject matter requires me to come up with a lot of safe terms instead of the original words, in this case, for the condition of being undressed. Let's see how many I can slot in. I guess it's not really accidental because she dropped hints later that it was intentional, but at the time I thought it was. Went on a date with a co-worker. While waiting for her to get ready in her living room, I could see her full bare figure in the reflection in a mirror on a door. She had a ridiculously awesome body, too. I used to work in an electronics store. We regularly had promo staff and reps in on the weekends to sell their stuff in store. This particular weekend, we had 3 models in promoting some camera or something. Late afternoon, I go into the customer collections room where reserved stock is kept to look for an item. As I'm clearly in there looking for something, these girls burst in and start taking off their branded dresses to change and go home. In shock, I say, "Do you want me to go out?" And they're like,
"Nah, it's okay."
Then some checkout girl comes in and laughs, gasps, and drags me out. Gutted.
Checkout girl just doesn't understand.
Becky's a B-word.
Oh, she wants to be called Rebecca now.
When I was about 6, I was at the ocean with my parents. My dad was playing with me in the breaking waves on the beach. I saw a rough wave wash over this young lady a few feet from us, and it totally swept her bikini bottom off. I couldn't believe it, and no one, including her, seemed to be aware for several long seconds. It was a massive late 1970s bush. I saw it before my dad and pointed and yelled, "Look at the hair!" My dad was up to speed quickly and swept me up facing the other way, as a guy apparently with the woman somehow found her bikini before it was lost forever. She was sitting down in the water when he brought them over and said, "You lose something?" I learned a lot that day. I was on a Mediterranean cruise in summer, so the top deck was filled with people sunbathing. This one lady with rather a large chest was sunbathing with her family, taking off her bikini straps, as some do to avoid tan lines, I guess. Anyway, she accidentally dropped it and I got a full-on view of one of her maracas. She looked around to see if anyone noticed, caught my eye, and gave me a cheeky grin before I looked away blushing. When I was working as a PA on a TV show, we filmed an episode at a fashion show. I spent the evening wandering around backstage getting models to sign releases. Most of them were undressed or half undressed. Best work day of my life. Was working in my fish and chip shop, and just across the road is a bunch of terrace houses. The windows upstairs start on the floor, but I assume the girl had no idea. My mum actually pointed it out to me, and it was a girl in her natural state in front of the window. The guys in the garage around the corner were walking down the street opposite of her window and got an eyeful as well. I later learned she was the sister of a guy I went to school with. Your mom is a bro. This was also one of my top "this crap just kicked in" moments. I was hiking Mount Lafayette and I knew that I was nearing the top. It's a decent hike, so I was pretty beat and ready for a break. On the last climb, I could see a large boulder up ahead that was sitting at the summit. I pushed forward a bit and looked up again toward the boulder. At the base of it was a gorgeous, mostly naked girl squatting down. I thought to myself, well, this is a hell of a reward for the hike. She then proceeded to stand, zip up a full Scooby-Doo costume, and walk over to her friends. When I was a junior in high school, I had a math teacher that was probably in her late 20s or early 30s. One day, near the end of the first semester, she was wearing a dress of sorts. It was in Florida, so it wasn't getting cold at all, and she was just trying to reach something off the top shelf near her desk, when the two straps holding up her dress just snapped, and the entire dress fell to her feet. Sure, she was still wearing panties, but the dress didn't hide bra straps that well. And well, that was nice. I didn't have her the second semester, but from what I heard, she got in some trouble for wearing inappropriate attire for a teacher, and had been suspended for the first month of the semester. I installed security alarms, cameras, sensors, and locks. On one install, I placed a camera in the master bedroom like the husband had asked. While I was still there installing, I was checking the cameras and finishing up the tests, and the wife came out of the bathroom completely naked from the shower. I hastily tried to exit the screen, but the husband who was peering over my shoulder told me not to and just stared at his naked wife while I was in between him and the screen. Just to be clear, I did not do the deed with either of them, that time. Was at an indoor water park waiting in line for the attraction that simulates surfing, Flow Rider, I think. Well, there was this really cute girl up and she bails face first. Now, if you know these attractions, you know that there's a lot of force behind the water. As it turns out, it's enough force to completely remove a person's bikini, top and bottom. Must have been really embarrassing for her, but I liked the piercings. Not sure if you can say accidentally, but my neighbor used to be a manager for exotic dancers. One day I'm out in my garden and happened to look up at their back bedroom. That's when I discovered where auditions took place. I got a lot of fresh air from that day on. I own an adult nightclub and auditions are at my house. Yeah, that sounds above board for sure. Around 16 at the time, I left my house after my sister and her two friends came over, one of which is just absolutely banging with an amazing body that I may have thought about once or twice anyway. Nobody else was home. Forgot something in my room, so I ran back in, but I guess nobody heard me come in. I walked down the hallway to my room and past my sister's doorway that was open. I glance over and my brain locks me into place mid-stride, jaw hits the floor, while it burns the image of her butt-naked cupping her chesticles. They all look over at me and scream. I can't look away. She runs toward me and closes the door. I ran to my room, took a few minutes to savor what I saw, and left. I was about 10 and we went snorkeling with the group on vacation. This old, unattractive woman popped out while she was underwater. She didn't notice. I couldn't stop staring. First real bosom I ever saw. That was an image I didn't want and it is now burned into my head. Thank you for that, original poster. My sister and her boyfriend were doing the deed. It was hard to tell with the noise. Well, after an hour, I hear her door close and I think, thank God he left. I can take a crap now. I walk into the bathroom and drop my pants in the dark and start to squat when the lights turn on and her boyfriend walks out in the buff, full staff and says, "Ready for more?" I just stare in shock and he now realizes that I'm not my sister. Just coughs and walks away. I no longer feel safe to crap in my own bathroom. Pull my pants up and just go to bed. Female friend of mine was getting ready for her sister's wedding. She was sending me snaps of herself asking questions like, necklace or no, to me and her boyfriend, and she accidentally sent me a picture of her mammary glands hanging out in the dress she was wearing. Trust me, she didn't intend on sending me that picture. Work at a hotel on the beach. Usually, every night before I leave, I take a walk around the building just to make sure everything is okay, people are quiet, etc. All of our rooms have balconies, but luckily the way our building is set up, you can't see into another balcony from another balcony. Earlier that day, I had a newlywed couple checking in. All went normal then. Later that night, did my rounds and I saw them on their balcony. He's leaning up against a patio chair turned backwards, pants pulled down, and she's sitting on the chair giving him head. Okay, for all purposes, that's technically an evictable offense, but I just remembered they're a newlywed couple, no one else can see them on their balcony the way our building is configured, so I just turned around, walked back inside and let it be. At least I knew their marriage got off to a good start, hopefully it stayed that way. During college, I was drunk at a party that ended up moving to a local bar. One of the hot girls in the class ahead of mine came up to me and this other dude. The other dude, I guess, had a bet with her or something, and took her walking up as the perfect time to remind her. He said, "Remember, you still need to flash me." I might be paraphrasing. She gives him an annoyed look and then just flashes the both of us for a good 5 to 10 seconds. Very nice sight, would look again. My wife used to do triathlons, the sprint and Olympic lengths, not Ironmans. She was doing a women's-only sprint triathlon, and I'm hanging out near her bike waiting for her to return from the swim, first leg of the race. The most experienced athletes bike and run in their one-piece swimsuit. Inexperienced people take the time to change their clothes. There was a woman in her late 20s changing nearby my wife. Obviously new to this stuff, she had planned a different set of clothes for each activity. She had some friends holding up towels to shield her while she changed from her swimwear to her bicycling gear. She got the suit off and struggled to get her bike shorts on over her wet legs while crouching behind the towels. Then she said, "Oh, frick it," stood up bare-chested and proceeded to struggle with her athletic bra. She had a nice all-over tan, I'll give her that much. Walking to school on a soggy morning, saw my art teacher in her minivan changing her clothes. Normally you can't really see into this side of the passenger area windows, because they were all semi-tinted a deeper color, but it just stopped raining a bit earlier and the sun came through the clouds and shined down on the car, lighting it and the area in general up very bright. I could see right into the car window. Mind you, my art teacher was 29 at the time, fit and moderately attractive. Bosom was out for all to see. I was 14 in 9th grade. Probably one of the best days at school followed thereafter. I was in middle school and I was walking behind a girl in high school who was wearing a dress with no panties. The wind picked up when we got off the train and I thought I was the only one who noticed. She didn't even seem to care. Later, I found out that another boy saw it too and we're best friends to this day. I was at my friend's beach house when I was 16. He had a really hot sister that was about 20 at the time. We were watching TV in the living room and she comes in to hang out with us wearing a t-shirt and loose-fitting boy shorts. Looked more like boxers, to be honest. She sat near me and put her legs up in such a way that I had a marvelous view of her lady parts through the baggy leg of the shorts. I tried not to stare, but it was pretty cool when I was 16. The cheerleaders lived across the street from me in college. Every day, my roommate and I would sit on the front porch, have a smoke and wait for the cheerleaders to get home from practice. One would always change with her windows open, and we just sat and watched, thinking she never realized the curtains were open. Then one day, she waved to us and blew us a kiss. Cue the debate. Do we go over? What should we do? What if she just wants you and not me? What if she wants both of us? Former college cheerleader could have been anything. She could have wanted you to come over and do the deed, or she could have just liked showing off her body. Both are equally plausible, mainly because, at times, pulling tail was a game for us too. She probably knew people were watching and she liked it. I dated a girl who would have fun with herself in front of her windows so her neighbors could watch. That is truly disgusting. You should PM me her address so I know to avoid that area. Smoking hot girl going down a water slide. Her bikini top got caught and came off. She had a wonderful chest. My buddy once accidentally Snapchatted his nude to me and our group of friends instead of his girlfriend. Handed the Verizon guy my phone to get it turned back on. Opened Safari and the first thing that popped up was the best pic of my chest to date. We both just laughed it off. Been selling phones for like 10 years. Ran across accidental chest selfies more than a couple of times. It's usually never the kind you want to see. Also worked as a fireman/medic. See many there as well, but they're always like 70+ years old, no good ones there either. Oh frick, this reminds me. When I was doing long distance with my ex, we'd send each other pictures au naturel. She requested pictures of my eggplant quite often. She really got off on those. Well, she selected her favorite picture of my wang and put this as my contact picture, even after I came back from living abroad. I knew it was a bad idea, as it would show every time I rang her. Of course, the upside was that she'd always be down for fun when I rang her. Well, one day at the family dinner table, she's telling everyone how she wants a new phone. Her mum, dad, and sister, and me were there. Her dad just looks up to me and says, "You reckon she'll install a different contact picture for you on her new phone?" Oh gosh, I would die if that were me. I should also note that yes, the vast majority of these stories are about women rather than men. Then again, since a larger proportion of male indecent exposure cases are received to much less positive responses for a myriad of complicated reasons, perhaps that's not surprising. I was in London and my sister and I got last-minute tickets to see Patrick Stewart in A Life in the Theatre. We had amazing seats, 3rd or 4th row centre.
So at one point during the play, Patrick Stewart sits down on a folding chair right in the center in front of us. He was wearing loose shorts, and his fricking balls were showing through the shorts. They were huge. It was glorious and incredibly awkward at the same time. The whole scene, he's just balls out. I still can't look at him without thinking, dude, I saw your balls. When I was in 3rd grade, we had a really pretty, red-headed student teacher. I can't remember her name, but I remember she was teaching us French for some reason. Apparently she spoke it really well. I'm not sure why that would be part of the 3rd grade experience. One day she came over to help me at my desk with something, and leaned on my desk and bent over. For whatever reason, she decided not to wear a bra that day, and right in front of my face, swinging in her dress, were the largest pair I'd seen up to that point. It was glorious. I truly believe that event changed me, and set the type of woman I've been into ever since. It was certainly a formative experience. At a party in high school, my best friend got hammered and passed out in the front lawn halfway through. I was hanging with my other buddy and his girlfriend, who was also hammered, when he decided to go and check on my best friend. He asked me to make sure his girlfriend didn't do anything stupid while he was gone. She flashed me. I failed him. You had one job, damn it. I was a freshman at Louisiana State University a few years ago, living in the all-male honor dorms. During the first couple of weeks at school, I'd made friends with a couple of girls who roomed together and were friends from the same high school. They had a third roommate because they had a corner dorm and it was huge. All-girls dorm, so I had to be signed in and out. But it was a spacious place to chill, big as it was. So one night, I'm in there with friends hanging out. It's around 7:30 or so. Dining hall just cleared out. So the dorm is packed with girls hanging out and watching TV. And also showering. The alarm goes off, panic ensues as people scramble out of the communal spaces and dorm rooms, and also out of the showers. Positioned as I was at the end of the hallway because the dorm room we were in was in the corner, I saw 8 girls in various states of undress, wet and slippery, from half-dressed to completely starkers, running toward and from me. I'd been at university for a few weeks. I thought this was just the beginning. Nothing but this from here on out, boys. Didn't quite work out that way. But I'll never forget that one night it just so happened to. When I was 8 or 9, being driven by my mum somewhere and staring out the window, in the car right next to us at a light stop, this gorgeous blonde just casually takes off her shirt, removes her bra, then puts a new shirt on. My jaw was on the floor. Mum didn't even notice. I'll never forget it. Winning. I delivered pizza for 7 years. Reddit hardly existed when I finished that job, and while I knew some of the chests I saw were probably dares, that doesn't bother me. I knew it. Brazzers was right all along with the pizza guy gets laid a lot. Some people pay to see women's chests. You got paid to see women without tops on. Think about that. I think my best and worst accidental exposure is the same story. I was in my car with my now husband getting ready to leave the parking lot at Lowe's when we looked up and saw a couple trying to put a carpet on their car. First of all, they were trying to strap a 9x12 rug to the top of a retired police-issue Crown Vic, which was unusual enough. My husband wanted to see how they were going to pull this off, so we stayed in the car to watch the spectacle. They started to unroll the carpet, which is when the girl bent over in her short summer dress. Sans underwear. So I'm 20 feet from a bare snatch in broad daylight in a hardware store parking lot. It was gynecological. To quote Future, she was butthole undressed. Only my windshield stood between her birth canal and the two of us. I think both of us simultaneously yelped with surprise when it happened, at which point my husband remarked, "I can see the bottom of her brain from here." I was dating a twin for a short period of time. They still lived with their parents and shared a bedroom. My twin was taking a shower, so I was just chilling in the living room. The parents were out of town for the weekend, so the twins and I had the house to ourselves. The boyfriend of the other twin would come over at a later point that night, but wasn't there yet. After finishing a show on TV, I walked upstairs to go see if she was finished showering. When I walked into the bedroom, I saw her, naked as the day she was born, and I approached her from behind. I cupped her fun things, big ones, and smelled her wet hair and was about to tell her how nice it smelled when she said, wrong twin. Out of shock, we both stayed like that for 2 or 3 seconds, then I backed off and asked her, "Never happened?" She agreed, and we've never told my twin. Well, that was almost 10 years ago, and we were only dating for a couple of months, so by now she must have told her, I guess. How have you traumatized your parents? Here's my story. It begins far away from my parents, deep in the woods. I was 18 years old. As summer came to a close, I went on a week-long hiking trip with my girlfriend. We went off the grid, many miles from civilization. There were no designated campsites, running water, etc. We were roughing it.
Being young and randy, we wanted to have our share of fun adult times. So I bought a sizable stash of prophylactics. Of course, there were no garbage cans in the middle of the woods. When the deed was done, I had to put the used wang covers into a Ziploc baggie in my backpack. By the end of our week in the sweltering August sun, the baggie was full and funky. The trip went well. I returned to my parents' house exactly one day before I had to leave for my sophomore year at college. I was also a ridiculous slob. So, using my patented packing style, I hastily dumped my backpack's contents into my bedroom closet, picked through the mess, took what I needed, and left the rest. Yeah, I forgot about the baggie. But someone else found it. No, not my parents. My dog. Basically, my parents came home one day to find used prophylactics spread all over the living room. Yeah. Apparently my dog had found the baggie, but he didn't just sniff it or eat it on the spot or whatever. No, he took it downstairs and spread my week-old rubbers and splooge all over the couch and carpet in the living room. The first room you see when you enter the house. Welcome home, Mum and Dad. They didn't tell me about it for years to spare me the embarrassment. When my dad finally did tell me, he was laughing his butt off. But my mother was apparently not pleased. In conclusion, my childhood dog spread my used rubbers all over my parents' living room. When I was in 8th grade, I was staying the night at my friend's house, and it so happened that one of my favorite movies, A Christmas Story, was going to be playing on TBS. My family didn't have cable, and I knew everyone would enjoy watching it on Christmas at my house, so I asked my buddy if we could record it onto VHS so I could take it home. He grabbed a blank tape from his dad's office, popped it in the VCR, and we recorded Ralphie and his Christmas shenanigans. The following day, I went home and told my parents and siblings that I had a copy of the movie. They were ecstatic, and we all agreed to watch it the following week on Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve rolls around, and my parents, brothers, about 5 and 8 years old, sister, 7 years old, and myself gather around the TV to watch the movie. I rewind the tape to the beginning and press play. For the next 3 seconds, although it felt like an hour, my entire family and I watched a woman sucking a large male organ before it quickly cut to A Christmas Story. We'd obviously taped over one of my friend's dad's adult flick tapes. Nobody flinched. I looked at my parents, who had these bizarre frozen smiles as if nothing had happened, and everything was right with the world. My brother and sister continued watching the TV but had looks of bewilderment on their faces as they tried to process what they'd seen, while simultaneously trying to enjoy the beginnings of A Christmas Story. Nobody in my family has ever mentioned this event. I'm 30 years old now, and A Christmas Story is no longer part of our family Christmas tradition. Oh, sweet Lord, we've missed out on many great awkward family moments now that the age of the cassette tape has been and gone. We shall miss you, Old Faithful. When I was 15, I was just constantly in the mood all the time. I'd also never seen a male member other than my own or in an adult flick. These two things are important. So I have my group of friends, and one of my friends, who we'll call D, had older, cooler brothers. So they would get us adult flicks and we would trade with each other every so often. After a while, I had a collection of about 8 or 9 skin flicks, all VHS, hidden in a garment bag which contained a suit I never wore in my closet. I also had acquired a male enlargening pump. I know, laugh it up. Honestly, I thought it was small by comparison, but it was the kind that has a long cylinder and squeeze pump. This was also hidden in the garment bag along with rubbers and cigars. I just knew it was a genius hiding spot. Incorrecto. Come home from school one day with everything that was in the garment bag on the kitchen counter. Super busted, and my mum is freaking the frick out over the enlargening pump. It was like she'd found a severed head or something. She was mortified. She yells at me and says, "Wait till I tell your dad," and sends me up to my room. My dad comes home. I hear them talking, then I hear him ascending the stairs. I'm terrified. He opens the door with the biggest grin on his face, tells me not to worry about it, gives me my rubbers back, but says we have to throw the tapes and pump away. But he put them in a bag and put them on top of the garbage so I could retrieve them, and told me it was nothing, that I was a teenage boy and that my mum would never understand. My mum thought I was the devil, though. When we were about 5 or 7 years old, me and my brother discovered the similarities between ketchup and blood. Mum wasn't home yet, so we got some knives from the kitchen, all the ketchup we could find, cut some holes in our shirts for the knives, and staged a huge crime scene in the living room. We loved secretly watching the thrillers our parents used to see in the evenings from the living room door when we were believed to be in our beds, so we had some experience with a plausible scenario and put a lot of thought into it, creating a huge battle scene with blood on the walls, the couches, and of course, lots of ketchup on our motionless bodies in the center of the room. Mum kind of had a breakdown. You were a fricked up child. So when I was 16, I found out that who I thought was my dad was actually just my stepdad and not my real dad. Well, a sister I never knew about contacted me, and it turns out my real dad lived in a small town just 8 miles away from mine. Well, I met my sister and had her come over one day while my mum was at work. My mum came home early, and when I introduced my sister, I introduced her as my girlfriend. The look on my mum's face was priceless. That is beautifully evil. I was around 14 and was pretty depressed, so my parents were on guard. One day I woke up early with a runny nose, but being tired, I just went back to sleep. A few hours later, my mum is panicking as she wakes me up. My face was covered in blood due to a bloody nose, and I looked like a corpse. I sneezed when I had a bloody nose once during the night, so there was blood splattered on my wall and pillow with blood all over at noon, while I was sleeping pretty heavily when my mum came to wake me up. I woke up because of the loud screaming going on in my room and scared the entire family by accident. When I was about 8 years old, I was going through our medicine cabinet like the little rascal I was and found one of my brother's old EpiPens, the epinephrine injector for use during a severe allergic reaction. I was curious about how it worked and figured it was like any other pin in that you clicked the top of your thumb and the needle came out the other end. Turns out the needle comes out of the end that you click, and it ended up going right into my thumb. When my parents came upon me screaming my lungs out in the bathroom, the walls were painted with blood that I'd sprayed around getting the pen out of my thumb. Apparently, it was pretty grisly. Haha, my brother did exactly the same thing with my EpiPen when he was like 11-ish, in the middle of a church service. The image of a screaming child spraying blood all over the congregation is just too gosh darn funny. I love it. I was young enough that I took supervised baths. My mum stepped out of the bathroom for just a few seconds, and I thought it would be super funny to sink to the bottom and lie motionless. Mum didn't think it was nearly as funny when she came back in. Similarly, I was young enough to take supervised baths and was exhausted at the time. My mum stepped out and I instantly fell asleep, with my face in the water. I was dreaming and I knew it was hard to breathe. My mum came in screaming my name and my head shot up, slamming into the faucet. I was fine, but she put me to bed instantly. To this day, we don't know why, but toddler me decided one night to get out of bed, grab my toy hammer, walk to my parents' room, round the bed, and smack my sleeping dad in the face before dropping the hammer and returning to bed. He's still jumpy in his sleep. I fell out of a moving car when I was 6. Luckily, I was in a car seat and landed in grass. How does this happen? One word: Jeeps. For some context, when I was about 7, I lost my cat. He just disappeared one day. Probably coyotes. But his favorite thing to do was sleep in my mum's bathroom sink. Also, my neighborhood is infested with cats because someone down the street never got hers fixed. So now for the real story. I was swinging on my porch swing, looking over into the bushes and saw a cat. It was laying down, eyes closed, mouth open. No wounds as far as I could see. It looked asleep. But it looked sick too, so to make it feel better, I picked the dead cat up, took it inside and placed it in the bathroom sink. Plus, I was feeling really lonely after my first cat disappeared. I thought my mum would let me keep this one. In conclusion, my mum walked in on me petting a dead cat I'd placed in the bathroom sink. I find this morbidly adorable. A child with little understanding of the concept of death, attempting to tend to an animal's corpse. I think that definitely would have left a mark on me as a parent, though. I think that I'd be more moved than traumatized. My mum got my sister and I our first set of makeup when we were 11 and 15 respectively. We ran to the bathrooms to try and figure it out and immediately decided that the best course of action was to paint bruises and wounds all over our faces, fake fight sounds and screaming, then run to our mother's office area appearing like we needed to go to the hospital. It worked. She turned about as white as a sheet and screamed before we collapsed into laughter. We weren't allowed to have makeup again until we were adults and bought it for ourselves. I haven't, but my little sister used to hold her breath when she threw a fit. Used to scare my mum to death. My dad said, she'll start breathing when she passes out. My daughter threatened me with this. I looked at her with a bored look until she went down. I didn't catch her or anything. She came to and realized Daddy wasn't being bullied. The first movie I saw with my ex was Knocked Up. At the time there was awkwardness because we'd accidentally had unprotected fun the week before. It turned into a big joke between us and I bought her the movie for Christmas. Mum asked me, "What did you get Jen for Christmas?" And without hesitating or thinking, I said, "Knocked Up." She was driving and almost wrecked the car. This happened the summer after my senior year of high school. After a long night of drinking, I came home and apparently felt the desire to spew. My parents live on the 3rd floor. I live on the 2nd and have a bathroom on my floor.
For some reason, I turned the fan on when I went into the bathroom, which is kind of loud, and my parents' room is pretty much right above the bathroom. So I spewed hard, mostly in the toilet at first. I got hot and really sweaty when I'm spewing, so naturally I stripped down to my boxers. I then somehow managed to spew all over myself. Well, that's unacceptable to drunk me, so I decided to take a shower to clean up. Never managed to turn the water on. Next thing I know, I'm getting woken up by my mother screaming bloody murder, crying profusely. Apparently, I passed out in the tub. The fan woke up my mother in the middle of the night, so she came to investigate and found me barely dressed, covered in my own spew, passed out in the bathtub with, as she says, my eyes rolling in the back of my head. She thought I was dead. I would say that was a bit traumatizing for her. In conclusion, my mum found me passed out, covered in my own spew in the bathtub, and thought I was dead. I should note for our listeners that even saying the more commonly accepted and medically correct terms for spew can get us in trouble with YouTube, which is why I had to say spew so many times instead. Spew. When I was in kindergarten, I made a friend while at school. We really hit it off, and she said she had a big bag of Halloween candy at home and offered to share it with me. It was a fairly short walk to her place from school, and from her place a short little walk home. So I head over to her place and completely forget to tell my parents where I went after school. I completely lose track of time. We ate candy and played video games. Her family must have thought my parents knew where I was. We played board games and ate dinner, and I didn't go home until after 9. I remember getting home, walking through the front door and being greeted by the sight of my parents, both completely in tears on the phone with the police. I immediately realized what I did wrong, and I thought for sure I was going to be grounded forever. They weren't mad though, they were just overjoyed that I was okay. A bunch of bear hugs and tear-filled expressions of parental affection later, I felt terrible. They must have thought I was dead. I was missing for over 6 hours. Every single one of their friends was out looking for me. I'm such a butthole. In conclusion, when I was in kindergarten, I disappeared for over 6 hours on my way home from school and didn't tell anyone where I was, so I could play video games and eat candy. When I was younger, my parents took one of my toys away from me, a brand new mother-fricking Hulk toy. This made toddler me angry, so I did the only thing to do. I crapped in their room. I crapped all over their bed and floor. I reminded my mum about it, and she said I didn't just crap, but diarrheaed. I sprayed diarrhea all over my parents' bedroom. When I was young, maybe around 5 or 6, I was trying to find Christmas presents in closets or under beds, but instead I found a crapload of prophylactics and adult fun-time toys. At the time, I didn't know what they were, so I opened up the box of what I thought were balloons and started to run down the stairs with what I thought was a sword, or a vibrating toy, and trying to blow up the balloons. I then ran into the room where my parents were and started talking about how I finally found my Christmas presents. My parents still talk about that today. After being blown for the first time, I rushed home to tell my best friend in the world. I got on Facebook and told him every dirty detail. I then left my Facebook open when I went to shower. My mom, just arriving home, went to check her email and learned about my new adult adventures. My mum is the kind of person who doesn't believe children or teenagers should be allowed any privacy whatsoever, for their own good. I was really dumb and used to log all of my AIM convos, because who would want to read every single line hoping to find something salacious? Well, my mum, I guess, because she did, and buried in an AIM log was me telling someone that I really loved going down on him and couldn't wait to do it again. But she didn't tell me she read it, she told everyone else in my family, my siblings, my aunts, all of them, and all of her friends. She's a gossip and she lives on that crap. So everyone but me knew she'd found this, as well as some exposed photos a guy had sent me. Instead, she just carted me off to confession, bought me one of those Bibles for teens, and told me I needed to get right with Jesus. It wasn't until years later I discovered the depths of her invasion of privacy. Oh well. My dad was fixing this huge closet one day. The closet was very old and had an extremely heavy door. The problem with that closet was that the door hinges were loose. At that time I was about 8 or 9 years old and my little sister was fooling around inside the closet while my dad was trying to tighten the hinges. He told me to get her out of there since she was just bothering him, and as I lifted up, the gosh darn closet door fell down on my pinky toe. It's all a blur, but I clearly remember me running down the hallway screaming my heart out while my sock got pumped with blood. After that, I passed out, waking up a while later in the back seat of my father's car with a crapload of toilet paper around my foot. My dad didn't say a word. When I arrived at the hospital, I got put under and operated. Fortunately, they managed to put my pinky toe back where it belonged. I'm guessing my dad felt very shameful after the incident. However, Mum told me a couple of years ago that after I lost my toe, he immediately put it inside his mouth because he had read that that was the only way to save the toe from dying or something like that, and drove to the hospital with the toe in his mouth. I don't think he'll forget that.
Ugh, this one makes me cringe just thinking about it. When I was 13, I was about as randy as you would expect a 13-year-old kid to be. The problem was, I was living in a very religious household at the time. My parents go through phases. This was their religious phase. Luckily for me, it was while I was going through puberty. And my parents had an ironclad parental filter on the internet, so adult flicks were out of the question. So I decided to draw my own adult material. And I'm a pretty gosh darn good artist when it comes to drawing things that are right in front of me to look at. So what I'd do is I'd take magazine pictures of women who had relatively little clothing on and just edit out the clothing I was drawing. Well, of course, my parents found my stack of drawings eventually, which isn't too bad, I guess. My dad even said uncomfortably that I had some talent at drawing and should pursue it, just with a different subject matter. Here's the part that makes me cringe. My mother decided that one of the drawings looked too much like her. It was purely coincidental. It was literally a picture out of an advertisement that I had copied to the best of my ability. And she asked me, very uncomfortably, if I fantasized about her. Ladies and gentlemen, not much in the world makes you want to crawl into a hole and die more than when your own mother thinks you've been fantasizing about her. And I have cringed so far into my office chair that I'm in danger of becoming the world's worst transformer. Oh gosh, please God no, I want this story to be fake. You know how your parents told you to never run with scissors? Well, I didn't listen. I was running through the house like an idiot, and I tripped on the scissors and they went through my front teeth, and jammed in the back of my throat. Blood sprayed out of my mouth and my nose. It frightened my parents so much that my mum passed out, and when she fell, her face was smashed on the floor. So I had to get 3 stitches, and my mum had $30,000 worth of face surgery, so I figuratively and literally traumatized my parents. One time during my sophomore year in college, I'd been feeling guilty for not seeing my family very often, even though they lived 20 minutes away, so I decided to take them out for dinner. Since I had some extra cash, I thought it would be nice to take them somewhere better, so we all went to Black Angus. I thought it would be cool to bring my boyfriend that I'd been dating seriously for 6 months. No one in my family normally does this. I found out later that my dad was scared crapless that I was going to tell the family that I was either pregnant or getting married at the dinner. Well, crap. When I was 2 or 3, my parents had me in the backyard. I was running around and generally being a small child. You know how it is. Apparently, I saw something cool on the ground, and like most children, my first reaction was to put this fancy thing in my mouth. The fancy thing was bird crap. My mom screamed and took a hose to my mouth. Bonus, I'm a huge misophobe now. I call it Stunt Baby. My 4-month-old standing on my hand as I balance him and let people take pictures. I hated school in 4th grade. Terrible teacher, a few bratty other students, made going to school miserable. So I loved any excuse to get out of school for all or even part of the day, even if it was a doctor's appointment. One day, for some reason, my doctor's appointment was cancelled. I was having none of this. I barricaded myself in my bedroom, no lock on the door, just my desk chair, and some other stuffed animals as a blockade, and screamed that I would rather die than go to school. My mum was freaked out, crying hysterically and everything. My poor dad having to deal with 2 hysterical women or girls at once. The next day, I had an emergency session with mum's therapist. I traumatized my mother once, both times when I was about 3 years old. The first time we were walking through the Botanic Gardens and there was a wedding taking place. Apparently the bride was a large lady, and I piped up in my piercing little voice, "Mummy, look at that fat bride!" My mother grabbed me under one arm and ran away. She thinks the bride didn't hear, but she's certain some of the guests did. The second time I traumatized her, she took me to her work one day, and I met one of her colleagues. He was from Ghana and had very dark skin. Apparently I said, "Mummy, look at that dirty man." Mum said she just wanted the floor to swallow her up, but the guy handled it with exceptional grace and just laughed and said, "Don't worry, at least I can't blush." Yeah, I'm surprised I wasn't left at an orphanage after those 2 episodes. I now have kids of my own who are determined to give me my comeuppance. When my mum was dropping me off at preschool, I saw the father of a girl in my class who was black. I tugged on his shirt and asked him, "Excuse me, sir, are you Susie's dad?" "I sure am, why?" At this point, my mother was terrified to know what my next statement would be. "You have the same dark skin as she does." My mum was about to die until he responded, "Yeah, it runs in my family," while laughing. What was the best moments you've experienced while playing Dungeons & Dragons? The time we planned and executed a heist to steal a fortune belonging to our rogue's corrupt father. There was a lot involved, from using a magical bird familiar to recon the keep where the money was stored, to my shape-shifting character taking on the form of a guard to sneak some of us inside, to recruiting a posse of disgruntled locals to help us cart away numerous bars of silver and gold. But the best part was when, after we set off some magical alarms on our way out, the father rushed into his vault to check on his fortune and threw back the tarp covering his stack of gold and silver bars, only to find that the precious metal was all gone and the tarp was covering a live bear. Suddenly, bear. Did I mention it's a magic bear who often wears a sign saying, "Magic bear, do not eat"? As a willing forever DM, I would just like to say that I have been waiting with bated breath for this kind of story grouping to come up in my assignments. Huzzah! On to more D&D stories. My party went from revered heroes of the town they saved to hated outcasts with an official restraining order approved by the king himself when they tried to prank an old merchant and ended up murdering a beloved town elder, then trying to steal his mayorship. This sounds like someone had to roll more than a single one to accomplish that. Telling my party that the main archery store is called Target. Thinking about that brief pause followed by a few sighs and reluctant laughter still makes me crack up. My name was Doug Windchaser, but I insisted everyone call me Darkblade. Well, my whole party just kept calling me Dougblade or Duckblade or Dudblade. I had a similar experience. I told them my name was LV Sugartips. They thought I said sugar, followed by a word for a female's chest. It never changed for months of playing, and I even have a mug with them from LV Sugar Chest. Safe to say, my character has been renamed without my permission. Ah yes, the old taser face conundrum. I once had a character called Guinevere. Everyone called her Gummy Bear. Somewhat inadvertently ended up stealing from and systematically dismantling a merchant family's bedding business across multiple cities. They were completely unrelated to the story, but we just kept bumping into them. They didn't happen to sell cabbages, did they? My character was a broken clock, right time of day kind of character. The type that would eat the only lit candle in a room just so the other party members wouldn't be able to see when they woke up. The highlight of our campaign came when I was having such crappy dice rolls that I decided to just aim for the space next to the enemy I was fighting to see what would happen. I rolled a 1, so I missed that space and hit the enemy instead. On my very first D&D session, our party was going on a treasure hunt and had just encountered a monster the DM liked to call a knuckle dragger or something like that. He had intended us to fight it like a boss battle, but before we fought, our paladin intimidated it to stand down for a turn, so we all got a free action. Or at least half of us would, since the DM rolled and said it was so hungry that it will only be stunned long enough that it will run on hunger alone. This worked great for my character. I play a sneaky human monk with literally no backbone to her and who is now trying really hard not to fight the giant ogre creature we were looking at. Just before we encountered it, we had raided a goblin camp which included having a whole bunch of jerky with us. My free action was to immediately offer this knuckle dragger all the jerky we've got so that maybe it would get full and no one would fight. Win-win. A few lucky rolls later, the fight ends before it began, with a healthily fed knuckle dragger, some level ups, and allowing us to skip a few more traps in the temple. We adopted him, by the way. His name is George. The paladin feeds him. I'll always be happy about the time my party ran into some goblins hauling oil into a ship. They opened up a barrel of oil and tossed some on the goblins, and then lit them on fire. The goblins, not being that dumb, jumped in the water. So then the party dumped oil, using a floating hand to cover a wide area, all over the water and lit that on fire too. What did those goblins ever do to you? The ship was a pirate ship that was essentially holding the town captive. The oil was actually one of the reasons the pirates were raiding, since it was in high demand in the pirate stronghold. The goblins were essentially deckhands and a hobgoblin was the captain. It was a pirate-heavy couple of sessions. Ah, pirates. Outlaws' lives are forfeit. Carry on. Why are acts of painful, Geneva Treaty violating murder so much funnier when they're carried out in this game? I may never know because pausing to work out would stop my games being so hilarious. More nautical hijinks to follow. I was DMing a campaign with a new group. Only one guy had ever played before, 5 players total. They had a ship and were traveling by sea to new quests and transporting some goods for cash when they landed. I had in mind to have them and their ship captured by pirates and have them escape later, so I sent 2 full warships at them full of pirates, hopelessly outnumbering them, thinking, there's no way they can get out of this quest. They panicked. As the pirates got closer, arrows started flying. What did they do? Well, one of the goods they had was a high alcohol grog, and they had a heck of a rogue archer. So they wrapped a couple of arrows in rope, dunked them, lit them, and fired them into the sails of the other ships. I made 3 separate rolls for the sequence of events between the hit, the rope holding up, and it successfully lighting up the other sails, per ship. And they fricking nailed it both times, on all accounts using teamwork and assists on skills. They burned 2 fully loaded, heavy pirate ships at sea using 2 arrows. I was in awe. I had to give them extra XP for their ingenuity. My players had to fight a dragon. They rolled shockingly well throughout the fight and were surprisingly winning. So being in the open, I had logically had the dragon flee. This was surprising given they were only level 3 and only bad rolls from the dragon had kept them alive. Most everyone got an attack of opportunity in or ran as it thrashed out of the tower, making it collapse, but the half-orc barbarian wasn't having any of it. She had a custom weapon from a special orc bad guy the party had fought. It was essentially a hook on a chain you could throw and drag people to you with, and her usual greatsword as a weapon. This will become relevant shortly. As the dragon flew up, she said she wanted to grapple it. Rolled, succeeded. Okay, you're holding onto its tail. She then spent the next couple of rounds as this massive dragon flew hundreds of feet into the air, climbing to the middle of its back. The dragon was rolling and thrashing, trying to throw her off, but she rolled great every time and hung in there. Then, she wanted to throw the hook and latch it onto the dragon's face or eye. Rolls a fricking 19. Hook lodged in the dragon's eye, and now she's riding it through the air like a venom-breathing bull at the world's scariest rodeo. Then she started hacking at the dragon's wing. At this point, she's like 300 feet in the air and is expecting this to just be a badass way to kill herself. First attack hits, okay damage. Second attack crits, almost max damage. I say that the wing shears free in a gout of blood, the brittle wing bones splintering under the mighty blow. Now she's riding an almost dead dragon as it plummets to the earth from a height that would kill anything like a green Slim Pickens, planning to go out in a blaze of glory. As the dragon and orcs smash into a building in the town, the other PCs run there to surely find their friend dead. Well, half-orcs have a feature that makes them particularly hard to kill, and I figured the spirits she worshipped would be pretty gosh darn impressed by such a move, so I gave her one last chance. Roll a con save with disadvantage. For non-D&D players, this means you roll 2 20-sided dice and take the worst of the 2 rolls. First roll is a natural 20, everyone is laughing, saying if only it wasn't at disadvantage. Second roll, another fricking natural 20. Table loses its mind. The other characters dig through the rubble, and among what is left of the splattered dragon, they find a barely alive, unconscious half-orc barbarian with a giant grin frozen on her face. I ruled even with healing magic, she'd be so wounded she needed a week to recover, so the party had to drag her around in a cart for a while. But thus began the reoccurring legend of Ure the Dragon Slayer through my games. Using spring-loaded gauntlets meant for deploying quickly hidden daggers to house and launch small snakes at enemies, and the look on everyone's faces when I did this. Party was fighting Orcus, final fight of our entire campaign. Fate of the universe resting on our hands. My bard had an ability that allowed me to replace up to 4 rolls with whatever I roll. Since it was just based on enemies in an area of effect, I was able to get 2 in each time. We kept a minion alive just for this. I also had an ability that allowed me to re-roll any d20 I roll 3 times a day, so I cheesed the frick out of those 3 abilities. Orcus ended up getting dominated, crit himself because I rolled a nat 20, and replaced his attack roll with it, made him fail his save with a super low roll. Then did the roll thing again, crit him again and made him fail, so he was essentially hitting himself for 3 rounds of combat, 2 of them being crits. He died from hitting himself, and my DM was visibly just, God damn it. I'm not super good at the roleplay aspect of the game. I'm a new player, just under a year of playing, but my group disbanded after college ended. Anyway, my party was in a fight from a set-up stealth mission gone wrong. One person was unconscious, the other struggling, and I had the big muscular barbarian attacking me. My DM said he was a Russian Armstrong from Fullmetal Alchemist. I was pretty low on HP, and no potions or healing spells as the unconscious player was the cleric. Out of a random turn of events, I asked the DM if instead of attacking, I could use a charisma check to flirt with him. He said, sure. By the way, my character was male. Rolled a natural 20. We made out for 2 turns, and on the 3rd turn, I failed my roll so he stopped kissing me and attacked me. On my next turn, I said, as my character, "I can't believe you. I thought you were different than the rest, that you and I could make all this fighting come to a standstill by the others seeing the true love you and I had for each other. I see that you just used me for personal gain and tossed me aside like common trash. I've never felt so abused in my entire life." Started crying and dashed away from battle. My DM said, "He technically has an attack of opportunity to use on you, but he's not gonna use it." The other player convinced the enemy I made out with to come after me and beg for forgiveness. And he managed to take out one of the two people fighting him, and since the big barbarian had left, the other one got scared and ran. So we ended up winning the fight, I guess? The barbarian enemy became an unintended love interest for the next while, all because I didn't want my character to die. The old bard seducing an unlikely enemy trope. Even my biggest horn dog of a bard character has never gone so far as to try this, but I salute you for succeeding, my good fellow player. I always play with the same group of friends. They're good friends, but not the greatest D&D PCs. Said friends also have a tendency for their characters to change motivations rapidly without reason, even occasionally based on out-of-game info. I love my friends, but my patience was running thin with their "play whatever is the most convenient" attitude. In our most recent adventure, our party was mostly good, my witch being the lone, unknown holdout. Over the course of 3 to 4 play sessions, 6+ hours each, my witch began dragging each of the other characters towards evil. It started with simple acts like convincing the druid to summon squirrels to disarm a trap laid for us, and culminated in a cruel torture scene where I burned a man alive from the inside out to get info on our next target. After the deed was completed and no one stepped in to stop me, our DM announced that the entire team would have to shift their alignments to evil. They were all complicit and could no longer claim to be good. It was so satisfying to see my fellow PCs realize that the actions they took in character would have meaning, and they could not claim to be good while committing evil acts. Everyone's playstyle has evolved significantly since that point.
Did you cackle in a suitable manner?
You're gosh darn right I did. It was incredibly satisfying to watch them struggle with the implications it had on their characters. And for the record, I wasn't attempting to strip them of their agency. I only convinced the DM to change their alignment because they had the choice to stand up against me on multiple occasions, and time again decided to say and do nothing. I wanted them to show me how good they were, but there wasn't much to show. One of our party fell into a river while we were crossing the ford. She rolled a 1, a critical danger roll, and fell into the rapids and was washed downstream. Our DM was lenient about it and really didn't want her character to die yet, as it was our first epoch of the game. So he said to her, "Roll to see if you can cling onto a branch and pull yourself out." She rolls a 1. DM is like, "Okay, so the branch broke and you're getting pulled further downstream. Roll again to see if you can swim to shore." She rolls a 1. DM. "Wow, okay, so you see a bridge coming up. Roll to see if you can hang on to the side and pull yourself out." She rolls a 1. DM. "Are you kidding me? Okay, you missed the bridge, but there's an island in the river and you reach it exhausted. Up to you guys to see if you want to rescue her." Everybody agrees. We throw a rope to her to get her back across. DM. "Okay, so roll to see if you grab the rope." She rolls a 2. DM. "Okay, so roll again." Rolls a 3. "This is insane. Okay, roll a D8 to see if you grab the rope." She rolls a 6. DM. "Hooray! The team pulls you to shore. You survive. Somehow."
You have acquired a new nickname, Toe-Rag the Luckless.
Probably when we met a friendly yet clearly evil lich in a tower. The poor paladin, the only good aligned character in a party of mostly evil, slightly trolly players, of course attacked him before we could talk to him and work out whatever we were here for. Whatever, all good with us, we helped him kill the lich. Then we discovered that he would only stay dead for so long. That just didn't sit right with us, so we prepared his tower a bit. We upper-decked his toilets, pooped on his coffee table, drew a picture of a horse doing the deed with a person on his door, we labeled the horse us and the person you, took the door off its hinges, raised the tower, destroyed its foundation, defecated on the rubble, and then left the door on top of the debris. All of this, of course, over the objections of our noble paladin, who just wanted to rid the world of evil. The direction the campaign took did not allow the character to come back, but I'm still expecting some GM retribution in a future game for that one. Totally worth it. My first campaign was with some twisted but hilarious friends. We had a couple of people with really high charisma and used the local townsfolk in unspeakable, but efficient, ways. At one point, we were accompanied by a local dwarven smith, with a martial past of some sort, and we needed to explore a creepy cathedral. Having heard some horrible skittering coming from the entrance, none of us wanted to go first, so we got the dwarf drunk and spoke of glory to be won in leading a courageous charge. Not content to simply scout, we also managed to hide several bottles of highly flammable liquid on him, for after the great victory, and poured a drink over him for luck. When he made his brave and glorious charge, a fire arrow in the back turned him into a rather unwilling bomb, and cleared out a nasty nest of spiders that lay in wait. Our paladin was lawful good, but also hopelessly gullible, and went along with our depraved deeds without complaint. Our second and more horrible transgression was just soon after this fiery escapade, when we used a local boy who had been helping us to find his friend as a fishing lure to draw out the queen spider from a pit that looked like certain death to enter. We all set up with bows and some large pieces of rubble at the mouth of the hole, lowered in the poor hapless fellow and dropped everything we had on the spider queen when she came to claim the morsel. Unfortunately, we were only able to recover the bottom half of the lad, but our entirely amoral and lecherous druid declared, "Well, at least we've got the good half." The druid and I were the Oakenrod brothers, an incestuous pair that used every opportunity to slip in references to our somewhat deviant ways. As we found out later, our dearly departed dwarf actually had quite the kinky dungeon beneath his house, and we were sure to make proper use of the facilities for our raucous lovemaking as soon as the group left us alone in the house. I think the DM left that day a little stunned by what he had witnessed. This isn't quite the most murder-hobo-y group of murder hobos to ever murder hobo, but it sure sits in the upper quartile of them. They still don't compare to the games I ran for kids, who were on a remarkable level when it came to lacking morality, although they didn't do quite so much adult stuff with each other. My players were trying to get a free room with a Thieves Guild password discount. The rogue knew the password because she'd infiltrated the guild, but when the group was asked the password, the rogue refused to tell them. The other two party members panicked and said super confidently, "Dip, dip, potato chip." Laughing my butt off, I decided that was worth 50% off the room, so the guild let them in. Starting a new campaign with new characters, my buddy decided to play as a Goliath paladin. Our characters were meeting at a tavern for a job. He decided that instead of walking through the door, he was going to kick it down. Fails the strength check with a +4. Twice. After being thoroughly humiliated and teeing off the barkeep by cracking the door frame, he tries to enter the door normally. Our DM has him roll dexterity because he's like 10 feet tall. Natural 1. He smacks his head on the top of the door frame and passes out. My party was en route to an island off the mainland that held a quest we needed to handle. On the ride, our DM decided to have us roll history to see if we knew anything about the island. 2 of us critically failed. My character no longer believed the island existed and was sure we would fall through the island when it finally came into view. Our bard believed it was full of big-chested Goliath girls. Another time, our DM had us roll for dreams. I critically failed, and our Goliath rolled a natural 20. His dreams invaded my own, and I had to sleep to him engaging in night-long festivities with other big-chested Goliath girls. The next day, I rolled pretty low on a charisma check at the blacksmith, and my character randomly yelled, "I see Goliath wangs in my dreams!" Good times. So far, all we've done was make our characters and a few scenes, but it was so fun coming up with random names that weren't so random, like Parry Hotter and Rilo Ken. Alcohol and lots of Monty Python references were involved. First time I played D&D, I played a chaotic knight. My character would do the most random crap possible, and the rest of the group thought it was ridiculous. One of the quests is to explore a cave, and before we explore it, the entire group rested up outside the cave, and one person takes watch. My character decides that he isn't going to watch over the group, and goes to the entrance of the cave and digs a giant hole and covers it, then comes back to the camp. Everyone that I was playing with was literally thinking, what the frick? So, long story short, we explore the cave, kill all the people, and almost defeat the main bad guy. But the DM decides that the bad guy flees from the cave, and I remind the DM that I want to roll for the bad guy to fall in the ditch and die. I roll a natural 20, and the bad guy falls into the hole and dies. The DM is teed off, everyone in the group is dying of laughter because my character's idiotic nature saved the quest. In Pathfinder, there's the time I started a prison riot with nothing but the message spell and some good bluff rolls. So we were planning to break the whole party out of prison, and to do that we needed to distract the guards. My character, a catfolk sorcerer with the Rakshasa bloodline, gets the bright idea to get the prisoners fighting among themselves. One of the powers of the Rakshasa bloodline that's available at creation is the ability to give yourself a +5 bonus on bluff checks a number of times a day, equal to 3 plus your charisma modifier. This character's modifier was +4, so it could be used a total of 7 times a day. Bluff is a class skill for a sorcerer, and we were playing at first level, so I had a rank in it, for a total of 8 points in it. But I was also using the Clever Cat racial feature, which gives a +2 to bluff, diplomacy, and sense motive. A total of +10. So all in all, up to 7 times a day I could roll bluff with a +15 bonus at first level. Now, with that context established, this prison had anti-magic crystals in it because the dwarfs running it aren't stupid, but I managed to make all of my rolls to successfully cast my spells through the anti-magic. I start imitating the voices of people using the message spell. Message isn't telepathic, it produces an audible sound which seems like a whisper to anyone who isn't directly intended for. So, people are looking at each other like, "What the frick did you just say to him?" because they think they hear a dwarf mumble something rude about how small a minotaur is in their area. Soon, chaos breaks out and I'm just standing in the mess hall, looking innocent while the rest of the party tries to grab gear and take out the guards. It was hilarious and it made me fall in love with the character. Our party had been temporarily deputized so we could help catch some criminals. We got these little badges we could flash to get access to parts of the city we shouldn't have been able to go. Our rogue, being a typical rogue, decided he wanted to rob a particularly hefty-looking coin purse from someone at a tavern. He manages to hand the bag off to someone else in our party, but he's cornered by the private security of the person he stole it from. We picked a bad target. This person was important. Thinking quickly, my bard grabs our rogue, wrestles him to the ground, and flashes his badge. I convince them I'm an undercover cop and we've been tailing this guy. I proceed to arrest our rogue and contact the real police to come handle the search for the stolen purse. Our party ties the rogue up, drags him out of the tavern, and skips town with a purse full of diamonds before the real police get there. We could have chatted this person up, learned they were a famous jewel dealer, and gone on some big quest to help them in exchange for riches, but instead we Ocean's 11'd that crap and we were never heard from again. Have you ever witnessed a birth that was clearly a result of a cheating spouse? It wasn't at the birth, but I used to work for a urologist who did vasectomies. He did a vasectomy on a guy, then did the requisite 3-month and 6-month fertility follow-up test to make sure it worked. The 6-month test showed no sperm, so the guy was all set to not father children. Fast forward 2 years and he calls my surgeon fuming, ranting and raving about how they messed up the vasectomy and now his wife is pregnant. So Doc orders another fertility analysis. Of course, it comes back totally negative. A very awkward conversation ensued in the exam room that I'd have paid anything to eavesdrop on. The best part is, the couple left the office teed off, with the wife sticking to her story that she would never cheat on her husband, and the husband in complete denial that she'd ever lie about that. Last I heard, they were gearing up to sue or something, but I don't work there anymore, so I don't know what happened. Not 100% sure how those tests go, but I just laughed out loud at the thought of some dude angrily tugging away like, "Not my kid, I'll show you." These stories remind me of something I experienced firsthand the day after my son was born. Nurse: "So, your baby's blood type is A negative. Wife: "Like me." Nurse: "And daddy?" Me: "No, I'm an A+. Nurse: "You must be mistaken, that combination isn't possible. I'll leave you guys to it." Me: pulls out phone and frantically Googles baby blood type combinations. Disclosure: the nurse was wrong. Props for checking first before attacking your wife. Yep, that's why he checked first, but if he attacked her straight away like some guys in these stories, they'd have one hell of a marriage to repair afterwards. A patient asked if both possible fathers could be in her C-section so that neither would miss the birth of his child. They'd figure out the details later. After a lot of careful consideration, because it did seem like a semi-reasonable plan, the answer was no because it was too easy to imagine many scenarios in which a fight might break out in the OR and instruments go flying. Also, there's a pretty strict rule about only one person allowed with the patient in the OR. In the end, she brought her mum. You know what? Out of all the outcomes here, I think they definitely settled on the most sensible one. Possibly the only sensible decision leading up to that baby. Who knows? We don't know the full story. A friend of mine went through it. He went down a dark path of substances and we'd lost touch after a big fight about how he was messed up all the time and he was wasting his life. He contacted me out of the blue to say that I was right. He needed to step up and be responsible, and that he'd quit everything cold turkey because he was going to be a dad. Apparently, he was going to help his girl get sober and they were going to have this kid and get married. He really got his crap together over the course of the pregnancy. He was clean, got a job, and got a nice place to live. She was not so dedicated. She continued to use all kinds of substances throughout the pregnancy. She ended up going into labor early at 26 weeks. She gave birth to a premature, addicted baby boy. He went directly into the NICU. She stayed at the hospital and visited the NICU until she was released. She then disappeared. She never visited the baby, never called to check on it, didn't go home, just fell off the face of the planet. He, however, spent every spare second at the NICU with that baby. However, as the weeks passed, it became pretty obvious that the baby wasn't his, as skin tone evened out and hair came in. Chick was blonde with blue eyes. My friend is super pale blonde with blue eyes as well. The baby was clearly half Hispanic. He wanted to adopt the baby, but they wouldn't let him. The state took it and it went into foster care. It totally messed him up for a long time. He relapsed for a while and got into a bad car accident. He spent some time in the hospital and then got everything back together. He's married now to a really nice girl and rapidly had 4 kids that are his with another currently on the way.
Isn't that just the worst thing? What was so different about him than any other potential adoptive parents? At least he'd been there the whole time. At least he cared. Did they really think putting the baby into a convoluted foster system was the best thing for him? Glad the dude's doing well, though.
Probably his history with addiction, which may have come with some legal troubles, which worsens the situation in the eyes of CPS. When I was born, my father was 100% certain that I was not his because his blood type and my mum's blood type couldn't have produced me. He punched a hole in the wall in the hospital and yelled at my mum refusing to sign the birth certificate because I have A-positive blood. My mum has 0 negative and he was positive that he had AB negative because that's what his brand new dog tags said. He was in the army at the time. Turns out they'd misprinted his dog tags. All his old tags said A-positive. In conclusion, a typo on my dad's army-issued dog tags almost caused my parents to divorce.
To be fair, a misprint like that could kill him in other ways.
But it's absolutely possible for an O-negative and an AB-negative parent to have an A-negative baby. Like the only 2 blood types that couple could produce are A-negative and B-negative? Do you mean you've got an A-positive blood type?
I'm not a doctor, but when my godson was born, the nurse told us about this guy who had gotten 2 girls pregnant at the same time. They both wound up in the hospital just down the hall from each other, giving birth hours apart. What a lucky guy.
When my mother was giving birth to my little sister, my paternal aunt was also giving birth to my cousin in the same hospital. My dad was back and forth between the 2 rooms often enough to get some looks from the hospital staff. Funny story that reminds me of this. My husband, then boyfriend, was in the process of getting divorced when I found out I was pregnant. His soon-to-be ex-wife found out a month later she was also pregnant from a guy she'd had a one-night stand with, not my husband. Prior to this, she was refusing to sign divorce papers because she hoped to reconcile even if he did have a pregnant girlfriend. Obviously, it wouldn't work out since she got knocked up by another guy, so she finally signed them. The similar part is that our due dates were 11 days apart. We had the same obstetrician and were set to deliver at the same hospital. My company switched insurances a week before I was due, and I got to pick a different hospital. Wouldn't you know it, we went into labor hours apart and delivered on the same day. Our obstetrician had to deliver my son first and then run across town to deliver her son. The OB did a double take when he saw my ex's family show up to visit her late after visiting us. They were the,
"He may have divorced her, but we didn't" mind.
His sister even stayed when she delivered to be her support buddy, even though she was officially with the one-night stand guy and his family was there. Our OB told us that may have been the most Jerry Springer thing she'd seen in a while. My friend was the delivery nurse for the hospital that all high-risk pregnancies go to. They're extremely busy and she's brought a lot of people into the world. She once delivered a baby in the parking lot by herself. This has come up on a weekly basis, but she shared the best story with us. A Caucasian couple come in and the mother is in labor. When the dude is filling out paperwork, the mother takes the doctor aside. She tells him there is a chance that the baby may be a different race than the father and to let her know as soon as the baby is born. The baby is born. The doctor turns to the mother and announces loudly, "Congratulations on your white baby boy." Well, this is fun. My wife's cousin, third, came out black. She's married to the pastiest Irish guy you can find. Their marriage didn't end, but this has created an interesting story. Grandma tells everyone that he is really just Native American. Her husband was half Native. He's now 15 and still no one in the family will admit that he's black. One of my colleagues in anesthesia once placed an epidural in a heavily tattooed lady. Apparently she had Steve's lunchbox tattooed above her hoo-ha. She gave birth. The OB-GYN turned to the father in the room and said, "Congratulations, Steve." The guy stated, "My name isn't Steve." No meltdowns or anything, just an awkward moment. That is brilliant. Also, what a tattoo to commit to. Clearly some misplaced faith in the longevity of a former partner's relationship. That'll be a painful one to remove. My mum is a labor and delivery nurse. One time she had a patient whose parents were present during her stay at the hospital. The staff there have a whiteboard with some general information about the patients like blood type, time spent in the wing, and like how far along. This information is nameless for HIPAA reasons and instead has a patient's number. So this patient happened to be the only one in the wing at the time. Her father was walking back from the cafeteria at one point and noticed the board. He stopped one of the nurses and asked if the blood type for the patient on the board was correct. He knew his daughter was the only patient there. It was B positive. The nurse confirmed it was correct. Turns out he knew his and his wife's blood type. He was O positive and his wife was A negative. The combination will never yield a B positive baby. He brings his wife out and just points to the board, and this look of shock washes over her. In conclusion, father of patient in labor finds out his wife cuckolded him 25 years later by knowing his blood type Punnett squares.
Did he draw the squares in the whiteboard? I would have totally done that. Funny story, I ran a lab in college, and we were teaching the kids about blood types. Kid insists that his parents were a certain type of blood and that his square had to be wrong. Came to find out he was adopted and had just found out through basic bio. Poor kid.
I'm white and my wife is black. I'm a frog belly fluorescent white, think ginger light. My wife is earthy brown. No one would ever describe her as light-skinned. We have a daughter. She had a difficult labor and our daughter was delivered via C-section. She did not really get to see our daughter immediately after delivery. Later in our room, she was dozing and they brought our daughter in. My relatives and my wife's relatives all commented on how my daughter looked so much like me and was not even close to the pigmentation of my wife. So I carried my daughter over to my wife and gently woke her and showed her our daughter, and said, "I don't think she's yours." We all had a good laugh. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend told me this story of hers. Woman and her husband were having their first child and it was the friend's first ever delivery, OB-GYN. When she got the baby out, she looked at it, then looked at the parents and asked, "Okay, which of you has 6 fingers?" The mother broke down crying, yelling "I'm sorry" to the husband. Their neighbor apparently has 6 fingers. Did the father begin a lifelong quest to bring the 6-fingered man to justice? That is inconceivable. When my wife was born, she was very yellow and the nurse quietly asked her mum about the paternity when the dad was out of the room. She was just born with a bad case of jaundice and that nurse was an idiot. My husband is half Mexican and I'm of Native American ancestry. We both look pretty white though. When our son was born, he had plenty of the blackest hair and looked very yellow. They kept saying he was jaundiced. He was in the NICU for other reasons, but the tests didn't show elevated bilirubin. We kept asking when he could leave the NICU room with us as his condition improved. But 2 of the nurses kept insisting that he was also jaundiced and that they'd need to clear that first as my milk came in or through supplementation, using it like a threat to get me to supplement. Finally, my husband said, "He's not jaundiced, he's Mexican, damn it," and left the room. It was first time I laughed out loud in 5 days. The nurse was so flustered. My best friend's stepbrother was that guy who found out he wasn't the father because the baby was black. I'll try to make it short. Dude had gone to rehab twice and was doing really well. He came back home for a weekend and screwed his ex-girlfriend. Left and went back to his home state to continue his newfound life. Got the call that she was pregnant and dropped everything to come back and be a father. We were really worried he would relapse, but he was great. So 9 months of preparation goes by, he was going to be an awesome dad. All worries about relapsing were gone and he seemed ready to become the best dad he could ever be. Baby comes out, everyone's happy. Nurse takes him aside and after a few minutes says, "I want to ask you something. You do know that's not your kid, right?" He says, "What do you mean?" "Well, that baby is at least half black, but the pigments are probably going to really darken." So he goes over to his ex-girlfriend and asks if there's any way what the nurse told him is true. She starts sobbing and breaks down completely. Admits that she screwed someone else right around the time he came back. So he says, "All right, I'm glad you and the baby are healthy. Have a nice life." Walks into the waiting room where all the grandparents are waiting. Cheers, celebration. "Everything good?" "Yep, healthy baby, healthy mom. I'm not the father. I'm out of here." And walked right out the freaking door. The girl's parents even wanted him to pay and support. He moved back to where he got his life back together and is doing incredibly well. But man, I wish he had all that time back.
At least he only wasted 9 months. If she had banged a white guy, they might not have noticed for 18 years.
This is clearly an incredibly complex and nuanced problem. She was single and clearly shouldn't be judged for behaving as such, but maybe be upfront about seeing other people around the same time? Or, with hindsight being 20/20, use protection. This story sucks for everyone involved. This one's about my mum. She had my brother when she was only about 16 and had a very hard birth with him. Back in that time, the husband wasn't allowed in the labor room and my grandma was at work. When my brother was born, he got stuck, so they had to use forceps, and he was also jaundiced, so he looked like an Asian baby. My grandma turns up after work and is looking at all the babies in the room where they were kept and asks which one was her daughter's baby. The nurse points to my brother, and him, looking all Asian, my grandma storms up to my mum in the ward and said, "Which Asian guy did you sleep with?" Well, my mum thought she was joking, so she said, "I don't know, it was too dark to see." My grandma then proceeded to hit my mother until a nurse came in and explained. My brother is now 44 and as white can be. So I'm an NICU nurse that was floating to the nursery. A baby was born with a specific genetic abnormality. He had one missing limb, but was otherwise doing fine. The pediatrician was in the parents' room discussing with them the follow-up type stuff for the baby, appointments with a geneticist, an orthopedic surgeon, etc. At some point in the conversation, the mother asked what the baby's blood type was, to which the pediatrician responded with A positive. The father of the baby insisted that was impossible, as he and his wife, this was their third baby, were both O negative. The pediatrician got totally flustered and came back to the nursery to verify the lab's results. The baby really was A positive. We even went so far as to redraw the baby's blood and retest it. Nope, A positive. There is absolutely no chance that the baby belonged to that man. The husband left the hospital soon after and didn't show up again until it was time to pick up the mum and the baby to bring them home. The mum spent the rest of the hospital stay lying alone in the dark, mostly hiding under the covers. My aunt is white and so was her husband. He passed a while ago. When they finally had a kid, my cousin was black. The family decided to ignore it, my uncle included. This was 1989, and to gain my young teen cooperation, I got an early Christmas gift, a Sega Genesis. Love my cousin. Not me, but this was an odd one that I heard because I casually knew one of the parents. The father, to be exact. He came in freaking out because his wife had a kid. Well, he was white, she was white. The kid was born with a very dark skin tone. He instantly dumps her and starts filing for divorce. She has no idea what the heck happened. She forces a DNA test on him before she'll do anything. 3 months later, well, turned out it was his kid. Her parents, his parents, everyone, think he is a butthead. His mother apparently had a black grandmother. So the genes came through extra strong somehow in their kids so many generations down the line. Safe to say they're going through a heck of a lot of therapy. She never cheated on him and he never believed her despite all her serious protests. Been about a year now and it's better but still not perfect. This happened to my brother's friend. His mother didn't tell him his father was black, so he grew up believing he was white. He got his girlfriend pregnant and the baby came out looking more black than he did. He stormed out, broke up with her, and kicked her out. After that, he confided in his mother about the situation, and that's when she broke the news to him. He felt like a butt and a half. She took him back, but he had to work for it. She was, of course, hurt by his accusations. But as far as I know, they're still together. My dad was a doctor and he never told me about any meltdowns, but he told me they would deliver a lot of babies for unprepared parents. Teenagers, mums and dads with obvious substance or alcohol problems, legal problems, etc., generally not ready to raise a kid. For every one of those risky couples, it was usually teen parents who were 16 or 17, he would take a picture of the new mum and dad together holding the baby a couple of hours after the birth. Then a few weeks later, he would send the picture to them with a short note about how they'll make great parents and the baby is counting on them and just inspiring words in general. He has a whole photo album of the new mums and dads holding their baby in the delivery room when he was a doctor. And I have to say, it is some outstanding photography. Amazing stuff. And to tie these stories off with something a bit more heartwarming, let's have a nice long saga from small-town Illinois. I heard this from an old client who was an obstetrician. He was telling me stories about when he used to deliver babies at people's homes way back in the day. This was probably 15 years ago when he told me this story, and he was in his 80s. 83, if I recall correctly. Anyway, he was telling me about his son, and I asked if he delivered his own son. He said yes, and told me the most amazing, heartbreaking, and heartwarming story. In the late 1940s, the town ambulance/hearse/taxi pulls up at his little independent practice out in the boonies of Illinois. A volunteer firefighter comes in and says they have a lady in labor and they won't make it to the hospital, which is over an hour away. He tells them to bring her in. He delivers the baby and mum passes out. They clean her up, they clean up the baby. All seems normal. The mum wakes up and the doctor comes in to give her the baby. She starts screaming, "Get it away from me!" He's all confused and can't figure out what's going on. She keeps flailing around and screaming that she doesn't want to look at it. The doc takes the baby out back and comes back. She's calmer but still looks frantic and terrified. He talks to her and she just stares at him like he's got 9 heads. He finally asks, "Well, what do you want me to do with your son?" The mum stays silent for a long time, and as he's getting up to leave, she quietly says, "Can you get rid of him?" The doc asks what she means. She says, "Just make him maybe go to sleep so he won't wake up." He said it took everything for him not to beat this woman to death right there and then. He went off on a tangent about how much he loved his work, working with all the new mothers in these little towns full of salt-of-the-earth people with great family values. On and on about how happy it made him bringing life into the world, and this woman wanted him to murder her baby. He asked why, and she ended up saying that her husband is in the military and it's not his baby. She couldn't let him find out. He kind of understood her rationale for not letting her husband know, but murder? So he suggested family, an orphanage, and other options back then, none of which seemed appealing in my mind. She said no to all of them because she couldn't risk this coming back to haunt me. He told her he'd see what he could do, and he let her rest. The next day, he tried talking to her again, and she was just more adamant about making it sleep. She said she wanted to hold her baby. He refused since he thought she'd try to kill him herself. She went nuts. In the end, he sent her home and told her that he had given the baby to his brother, who was a pastor and was unable to have children. He promised he'd never tell anyone, even the kid, who she was. Then he said he taught her a lesson. If she ever found herself pregnant again, she would come to him whether it was her husband's or not. If he ever found out she went elsewhere, he'd tell everyone the story. He said he did this because he was afraid she'd get knocked up and kill the next one. And he knew he'd find out if she went elsewhere because he was the only baby doctor for 5 towns around and knew other doctors at the hospitals. Of course, she could have delivered at home on her own, now that I think about it. She never had any other kids as far as the doc knew. And he said he did check up on her once or twice with his colleagues. Supposedly she died from a substance overdose a few years later. The doctor and his wife raised that baby as their own son. His wife wasn't able to have kids. The pastor brother was just BS, and it was to make her think he'd already given the baby away. He eventually told his son a very watered-down version of the story when the kid was older. The kid ended up becoming a plastic surgeon and has like 9 kids of his own. He's doing very well, he's very happy, and he probably would have never had a shot had that small-town fireman tried to press on to the hospital and wound up delivering the kid in the middle of nowhere. He was convinced she would have delivered and then smothered the baby by the time they got to the hospital. In conclusion, lady gets pregnant by another man. Her husband has no idea because he's in the military. She ends up at a small-town doctor and wants the doc to kill the baby so her husband doesn't find out. Doc raises the baby with his barren wife, and the baby grows up to be a brilliant surgeon who gives the doc tons of grandkids and a huge family he never would have had otherwise. Was your hangout with a celebrity better or worse than expected? Absolute best experience of my life. I ended up running over Bruce Willis. If you ever get a Make-A-Wish, ask to meet Kevin Smith. I was a bald, chemo-y fricking mess. My dad contacted Make-A-Wish. They came out and asked me what I wanted. I said, him. And within a week, our tickets were bought for us and our trip was planned. Usually takes weeks or months for celebrities to get back to Make-A-Wish. Kevin had whisked us out to New York to meet him on the set of Cop Out, which was then called a different name. He met me with the biggest bear hug of my life, and he was the nicest, sweetest, most genuine celebrity I could ever imagine. I spent the entire day on set, met Tracy Morgan, Bruce Willis, manhandled all of the equipment they would let me touch, and in the middle of it all, Kevin says, "Hey, you want to be in the movie?"
Yeah, I want to be in the movie.
Okay, I'm going to have you run over Bruce Willis.
Thanks, Kevin Smith.
So if you watch Cop Out, I'm the student driver that runs over Bruce under the L train. At the end of it all, he invited us back to his penthouse overlooking the Statue of Liberty and let us see the rough cut of Cop Out. I spent all day and night with him. My life has been miserable in comparison ever since. When I was about 12, my mum won backstage passes to Huey Lewis and the News. I met Huey Lewis and then we got to sit in the front seats. He routinely pointed and sang at us throughout the show. Unfortunately, this was 2004, so I was surrounded by middle-aged women screaming at him. He was a nice dude, even though my mum told him I sang one of his songs as a little kid and named a song that wasn't his, as we learned a couple of months ago. He just went along with it. My father-in-law got in an elevator at a convention. Huey Lewis was in it. My father-in-law says, "Oh wow, you're Huey Lewis." Huey Lewis responds, "Oh wow, you're Doug last name." Father-in-law is in shock and asks how he knows his name. Huey Lewis then points to the convention name tag my father-in-law is wearing. When I was like 4 or so, I won a contest to have lunch with Lou Ferrigno. This was in the late 70s or early 80s when The Incredible Hulk was running, and I was a huge fan, so I guess I was totally disappointed to find out that his skin wasn't really green. I also remember that we had funnel cake. Yum. About 5 years ago, I won a competition to spend the day with Hugh Jackman on the set of Baz Luhrmann's Australia. Was the nicest, most sincere guy. Never forgot my name and introduced me to everyone. Total legend.
He's one of the few actors you could never convince me was a crappy person. I saw a video of him recognizing a reporter at an event as a student of his from when he used to be a teacher. He seemed so happy about it.
Yep, Hugh Jackman seems like an absolute delight from what I've seen. It takes a guy with a good, humble sense of humor to engage in that kind of joke rivalry with Ryan Reynolds and look like that much of a jerk. Won a contest a couple of months ago to see a private Cage the Elephant show, and got to chat with them for a bit afterwards. Really cool, funny guys. Gave me a shout out later that night during their actual show. The private concert was pretty awkward though. In 2009, I entered a vitamin water contest to meet Adrian Peterson just for the heck of it. I ended up winning. I got to talk to him for a solid 2 hours, then watched a movie with him. I got to bring my dad with me, and we both had a fantastic time. He's my dad's favorite player, and he nearly broke both of our wrists with his handshake. I also got an autographed jersey that I got framed. He was extremely pleasant and seemed genuinely glad to be there. Oh, and I got a year's supply of vitamin water, which was pretty sweet. Ever since that experience, I've entered every contest I've come across. When I was 10, my dad took me to a Kiss concert. Poison opened up for them, and we got to go backstage. It was kind of cool seeing all these huge guys with long hair that I had no clue who they were. Gene picked me up and called me handsome. That's all I really remember about it, though. I met Richard Simmons at Walgreens. It went exactly as you'd imagine meeting Richard Simmons at Walgreens would go.
I met Richard Simmons at the Gap in Santa Monica. I was buying a gray shirt and he comes up to me and starts going on and on about how gray is a bad color on me and I must wear purple. The color of royalty and passion. He was outrageous and exactly like he is on TV. He then walked around and picked out some purple shirts, went up to the counter, and had some woman, his assistant I assume, buy them for me. He kept asking me if I was single or in love. I'm a dude with a girlfriend. In conclusion, Richard Simmons bought me some purple t-shirts from the Gap. I nearly forgot his best line. When I was like, "Are you sure?" to buying me the shirts, he responded, "Don't worry, honey, I made a lot of money on my CDs."
Well, I won a contest with Radio Disney to see a Seattle Sonics game with the band, Jump 5. I was 10 or so at the time, and it was pretty freaking cool, not so much to brag about now. A friend of mine got to meet Roger Bumpus, Squidward from SpongeBob, and overheard him curse. My friend said, "Squidward, you said a bad word." Roger turned to him, looked him in the eye, and said,
"The frick I did."
He then chatted for about 30 minutes and took a picture.
Those are sentence enhancers.
In high school, 2000 or so, I won a contest where you got to have dinner and meet Kane, the wrestler. We didn't really eat with him since he wore a mask, we sort of ate in the room with him there. He got a bunch of food to go and presumably ate it on his way to the next destination. The character of Kane didn't really talk, so there wasn't much interaction besides a handshake and a photo. It wasn't a bad experience, but I kind of thought there would be more to it. 2 months ago, in December 11th, it was the first Foo Fighters concert in Mexico, and just a couple of days before I happened to win a meet and greet with the band. I was so excited to meet my favorite band. All the band members are so awesome to hang out with, although the meet and greet is only like 10 minutes. I was able to chat with every member of the band, take a pic with all of them, except for Taylor. Pat gifted me one of his guitar picks, the band signed me a vinyl, and Dave Grohl took a selfie with me. It was one of my best days ever. I met Hanson by winning a drawing thing they do for their fan club after most shows. I've been a huge fan since I was 12. The three of them arrived looking rather glazed over, shook our hands and took pictures without asking us our names, or saying anything other than a polite greeting, and went on their merry way. Polite but impersonal. You could definitely tell that they'd been through the motions too many times. My mum won a radio contest to hang out with Ludacris and I got to tag along. It was pretty cool, he's an awesome guy. He had complaints about whoever thought it was necessary to tell the caterers to bring so much chicken. He just talked about what his life was like and what it's like now. He learned everyone's name and signed a ton of stuff. Didn't get to spend as much time with the band though, just a meet and greet, a few questions and a quick show. It was fun, the band is awesome. Also, they love to have fans come up and sing with them, which is one of the coolest things I've seen a band do in a while. In 2001, I won a trip to Hollywood and a meet and greet with Jennifer Tilly. She was an absolute peach. Friendly, bubbly, personable, gorgeous. Everyone was telling how much they enjoyed her in Bullets Over Broadway. I was the only one who told her that I loved her in Bride of Chucky. She giggled and told me that was her favorite too. I've loved her ever since. That's sweet. I imagine doing a schlocky horror film would be tons more fun than most other productions anyway. Awesome! When I was maybe 12 to 13 years old, there was a contest on the radio to win a free lunch with Buzz Aldrin. First successful trip to the moon and the second guy to step foot on the moon. Apollo 11. At a Planet Hollywoods, or some similar themed restaurant. The question on the radio was simple. Name the 3 men in the Apollo 11 missions. My mum, who was driving me to basketball practice, swore the third guy was named Shepard or some other name. But I, a kid who was into space for a bit, knew that it was Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins. My mother pulled the car over, called in, got through, and used my answer instead of hers. We won. I got to skip school to go to the restaurant and get a free lunch. I barely got to meet Buzz Aldrin though, and this was probably around 1997 to 1998-ish, so Buzz was in his mid to late 60s. He had a table set up, and he was signing autographs. I bought an original Apollo 11 poster my mum had saved away in the closet. Totally forgot how or why she had a vintage 8x10 glossy prints of all the astronauts and a super cool metallic print poster. But basically, I said hello to an old man, told him I knew the answer to a radio show, got some things signed, and a photo was taken. Then I sat down and ate a burger with my mum. Pretty but hey, I got to skip school. In conclusion, won a radio contest with Buzz Aldrin of Apollo 11. I was pretty young and I didn't care. A couple of years ago, I did a science history project on what was going on at NASA ever since we landed on the moon. Well, one of the bits I was excited about was the trip to the moon to bring back a whole bunch of samples. Harrison Schmitt was the first and last pure scientist to go to the moon. Most of them are pilots and ex-military. He was a geologist, to be exact. He brought back 218, I think, pounds of moon rock, including helium-3. I called him for a project, but I kept getting his personal aide. She said she would have him call me back ASAP, but I didn't get a call for a week. Then I called like 3 times in a row, and I hear a little old guy on the other side of the phone introduce himself. I talked to him for like 45 minutes, shaking the whole time. I asked him questions like, how did he regulate body temperature? He said, the sun actually made it get quite hot inside the suits while they were digging for rocks, so they had what he described to be liquid long johns. Asked him about his work with helium-3 and nuclear fusion, and he said no one's excited about science anymore, so there's not as much funding as there needs to be. Last, the cheesy question of, what does weightlessness feel like? And he replied that it felt like never coming back down while jumping on a trampoline. I ramble, but he was a really nice guy. When I was 3, 1993-ish, my mum won tickets to go see the Wiggles at the Fremantle Town Hall. Anyway, once the show was over, me and my friend kept on dancing and playing in the hall while our mothers talked. We were only 4 left. As the Wiggles were leaving, they noticed us and played with me and my friend for about 20 minutes. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My dad worked on Ninja Turtles 2: Secrets of the Ooze. I got to meet the Ninja Turtles, hold Leonardo's swords, and hang out on set in the junkyard scene with the Foot Clan. It was kind of a big deal. Just a little extra info, I also got to visit the laboratory that the ooze was housed in that the Foot Clan stole it from. Also, I've told this elsewhere, but it's one of my coolest memories I have. After visiting my dad on set, my mum and I have to go leave, and as we drive outside of one of the giant sound stages, there are 2 guys, a prop master and costume guy, machining something metal. Sparks are flying off this workbench. Hard to tell what it was at first. As we get closer, I realize that what I'm looking at is none other than Shredder's helmet. But not just Shredder's normal helmet, it's the helmet of Super Shredder. Helped install Tom Hanks' home office, computers, printers, etc. He was really nice, does that count? He gave the 2 of us cookies. Computers? Printers? I thought he only liked typewriters. They're not AOL compatible. A friend of mine had cancer back in 2nd grade. The Make-A-Wish Foundation set him up to go with a friend to meet Fallout Boy. I got to be that friend. We got front row tickets to one of their concerts and we got to go backstage and meet them. I don't remember a lot of it, but they were really cool dudes and gave him a signed guitar, so that was cool. In '96, I won a contest to meet Adrian Paul of Highlander. We chatted about nerdy stuff, and years later, when I had my firstborn child, he contacted me to give congratulations. I still to this day don't know how he had my number or knew we were expecting. Pretty cool all around. I won a contest for a meet and greet with Cascade, general admission floor tickets to his AmITheA show, and VIP tickets to his after-party. Cascade was great. He came on the tour bus after the show, and I was able to talk with him about his favorite tracks and how it was like to be a DJ as well as the past gigs he went to. He really loves his fans, and I was lucky to get an autograph and picture with him. Some other people weren't so lucky because of Cascade's time constraints. Overall, a pretty awesome night. I found out I won at 3 p.m. on the day of the show, so I was kind of ecstatic. I was in the middle of stressing out for a licensing exam I was studying for, so this was the perfect stress reliever. Not to mention, I only spent $20 the whole night. Back in 2009, a friend of mine got us backstage for 9 Inch Nails for a quick band meet and greet. Trent had been someone whose music got me through adolescence, so I was pretty amped to meet him. When it came time, I walked up, we did the standard, everyone pose for the photo, and afterwards I said, "This is random, but I've got to know, are you a Dig or Reddit guy?" He looked at me, and I'll never forget this. "Actually, dude, Kevin Rose is a good friend of mine. I'm definitely a Dig guy." Oh well, I'm the co-founder of Reddit." "Geez, I'm sorry, dude." I thanked him for the photo and walked away. It was still a great show, and things worked out okay in the end. The moral of that story, kids, is to never meet your idols. Back in 2009, Dig was our chief competitor. It wasn't a platform for communities, just a single community, but the social news part was similar enough that everyone called us competitors. For anyone wondering, the person writing this story is verified as the actual co-founder of Reddit, and I'm honestly just including him on here because I can't believe that his testimony came up in my scriptwriting process about meeting celebrities. When I was 15, Tweekend had just been released. I got one of the first copies, which had a contest to win tickets to Cyberfest. A huge concert, 5 stages or something, with backstage VIP passes to meet the Crystal Method. I won. I never win anything in my life. Never ever. My mom wouldn't let me go. I didn't have an appropriate person to go with and give me a ride, someone she was sure wasn't on substances, and she didn't want to chaperone me. Goodbye $200 tickets, goodbye. I still haven't forgiven her for that. That's fricked up. I could maybe understand couldn't chaperone, but didn't want to is not a good enough excuse for making your kid miss something that cool. I totally agree. I mean, I went to the Justin Bieber movie, for Christ's sake. My eardrums will never be the same. This guy's mom should have bit the bullet and just gone to the concert. I won a contest to see and hang out with Less Than Jake perform an acoustic guitar concert at a guitar store. They were extremely nice and even drove me to their concert that was later that night. I always remember that it was in November because we talked about Thanksgiving traditions and they each talked about how awesome certain foods their grandmas made were. When I was like 8 years old, I got a backstage pass to a 98 Degrees concert. The Baja Men were the opening act, and my dad and I got to hang out backstage with them for like an hour. They were the nicest dudes. My dad told them I liked to sing, so they let me sing My Heart Will Go On for them. Then they autographed a CD for me and gave me a shout out at the concert. Never got to ask them who let the dogs out, though. Me and my cousin hung out with RuPaul once. He tricked some random guy into thinking he was an actual woman. It was pretty funny. I know we had pics, but I honestly can't find them anymore. Through a really convoluted connection, I was able to hang out backstage with The National, specifically with the drummer Brian Devendorf. He was extremely nice and went out of his way to pay attention to me and my friends. In retrospect, I feel bad because he seemed exhausted after playing a hell of a show. But he was still so intent on being sociable with us rather than just zoning out and having some beers, which probably would have been 1,000 times more appealing. He told a cool story about jamming with Bruce Springsteen, and then said he felt awkward about telling the story, as if I would think he was bragging about being a rock star. I think everyone involved was just interacting on a weird self-conscious level, which reached its apex when my friend, who was super drunk, asked him, "So what do you do exactly?" Having just watched the entire show and spent a good 20 minutes with the guy, we politely excused ourselves and let him move on with his evening, almost immediately after that. When I had cancer, my aunt asked me who I wanted to meet that was famous. I asked for Rick Mercer. 4 days later, he was on my couch drinking an Alexander Keith's. We ended up exchanging numbers, and we have been friends ever since. He even got me and Alex Lifeson of Rush to become friends. Not the exact type of answer you're looking for, but better than a friend of a friend met. Ooh, I've got one. When I was real young, my dad and me went to go meet Robert Englund. He was signing autographs and he was saying it was always nice to meet his fans when my dad said, "My sister-in-law is terrified of you." Englund responded, "Is she home? Do you have her number?" Robert Englund, my dad and I went over to a payphone where he dialed the number and waited for her to pick up. My aunt said, "Hello?" Robert Englund, as Freddy frickin' Krueger, "Is this the sister-in-law?" "Yes, who is this?" "I'll be seeing you in your dreams tonight." Then he hangs the frick up while cackling like a madman. So yes, sometimes meeting your heroes is as awesome as you would expect. Once I won VIP tickets and a meet and greet to go meet the Dirty Heads. I arrived, did the usual pictures with the group, and then we went on the tour bus to hang out before the show. Absolutely the most boring people I've ever met. I'm sure it's because they were on Green Herb, but 2 of them laid down for a nap and the rest were just smoking and chatting amongst themselves. I ended up just chatting with the tour manager. I would have rather just stayed inside the venue and met people there rather than the band. Glad it wasn't for the entire day. Maybe 15 years or so ago, my friends and I went to a horror convention in New York. One of the featured guests was Tom Savini. At the time, my friend Tony was super into horror makeup and a big horror movie buff, as all of my friends were. At any rate, I guess none of us knew Tom was going to be there. So when Tony found out, he got wet his pants excited about it. I've never been the starstruck kind, so I was sort of weirded out by his behavior, but figured he'd cool his jets when he finally got in line to meet the guy. Nope. Tony's steadily getting more and more visibly anxious and he keeps telling me, "Guy's my childhood hero, you know, man?" I get it, I've loved Savini too since I was a kid, but I guess Tony just got super stoked for meeting the guy or something. So we get to the front of the line and I shake Tom's hand and go, "I love your work, man, keep doing what you do." And I turn to Tony expecting him to introduce himself, and Tony literally has his hands covering his mouth in that 7-year-old girl who just met a Disney princess at Disneyland pose. Except this is a burly, bearded 27-year-old wearing an Eraserhead t-shirt. We stand there for like 5 horrible seconds, and I kind of turn to Tom to say something on Tony's behalf, and I get about a quarter of the syllable out of my mouth before Tony blurts out, "Childhood hero!" and runs out of the conference room, leaving me standing there with a very bemused Tom Savini. I don't even remember how I recovered, I just think I said something along the lines of, "He's a really big fan of yours, thanks for your time," and walked with about as much dignity as I could muster. I didn't win anything, but I did make Steve Martin uncomfortable. My then wife bought tickets to see him receive the Mark Twain Award for Comedy at the Kennedy Center. My wife and I had been out at a bar and I was finishing my gin and tonic. I ordered a second. As the bartender delivered it, the lights flashed. That's the indication that it's time to get seated. I tossed my gin and tonic down my throat and headed toward the ticket ripper lady. As she inspected our tickets, I asked, "I'm sorry, where's the closest men's room?" "Up the stairs and to your left." "Thank you." And I went up the stairs and turned to the right, because I'm an idiot. But I saw a sign that said men's room. Good enough for me. I headed for the door, I peed, flushed, and turned around and washed my hands. No paper towels, no regular towel, nothing. I'm in a suit. I can't exactly wipe my hands on my pants. I'm stuck. I finally just decide to leave my wet hands held in front of me like a surgeon freshly scrubbed for surgery, and I leave the men's room. And I find my wife telling Mr. Steve Martin, "No, I don't really get your comedy. We're here because my husband is a huge fan. Oh, here he is. Roman, Steve, Roman." I blurt out, "I really am a huge fan." And he sticks out his hand for a reluctant handshake. I stick my still dripping wet hand in his and shake vigorously. "Congratulations on the award, Mr. Martin. Sorry about the wet hand, I just peed. We should be getting to our seats. It was an honor to meet you." And with that, I let go of his hand, and my wife and I left for our seats on the exact opposite side of the balcony. Just before we rounded the corner, I looked back and saw Steve Martin standing beside his balcony door, looking at his wet hand. I knew what was going through his mind. I can't even wipe my hands on my pants, I'm wearing a stupid suit. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.